Lena Harper spotted the pattern 3 seconds before the countdown finished. 3 men. Perfect positioning, one target. She'd studied behavioral psychology long enough to recognize a kill box when she saw one. The calm, impeccably dressed man at table 7 had exactly 90 seconds before his usual exit became his execution. Every instinct screamed at her to stay invisible, stay safe, stay alive. Instead, she grabbed a water pitcher and walked straight toward the most dangerous man in Chicago. What happened next destroyed her normal life forever. If you want to see how one warning changed everything, stay until the end. Hit that like button and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far Lena's story travels. The thing about working Friday nights at Aurelius was that you learned to read people faster than any psychology textbook could teach you. Lena Harper had waited tables for 3 years while finishing her master's degree, and she'd developed what her thesis advisor called exceptional observational acuity, which was academic speak for noticing things other people missed. Tonight, she noticed everything. The restaurant hummed with its usual elegant chaos. Crystal stemware caught candlelight and fractured rainbows. Conversations layered over each other in that specific frequency of wealth, confident, unhurried, certain the world would wait. Lena moved through it all with practiced efficiency, her mind cataloging details the way it always did. The anniversary couple in the corner booth who ordered the same meal every month. The business dinner at table 12 where the younger man's hands trembled slightly whenever his boss spoke. The regular at table 7 who arrived at exactly 8:15 every Friday, sat alone, and left at 9:30 without variation. Marcus Vale. She didn't know his full name then, just Mr. Vale from the reservation book. Mid-30s, she guessed. Expensive suit worn with the ease of someone who owned a dozen identical ones. Dark hair, precisely cut. He ordered the same thing every week, steak, medium rare, no sides, water with lemon, and he tipped exactly 25% down to the penny. But it wasn't Marcus who caught Lena's attention tonight. It was the 3 men who weren't looking at him. Lena's training had taught her that human attention follows predictable patterns. When people deliberately avoid looking at something, that thing becomes the most important object in their environment. The man by the bar, built like he crushed walnuts for stress relief, checked his phone every 40 seconds while his eyes tracked the kitchen door's swing pattern. The couple at table 9 sat too rigid, their conversation too performative, and the woman's purse sat positioned at an angle that gave her partner a clear sightline to table 7. And the businessman near the window? He'd been nursing the same scotch for 40 minutes, hadn't touched his appetizer, and kept his right hand below the table in a way that made Lena's pulse spike. 3 points of a triangle, Marcus Vale at the center. She told herself she was being paranoid. Her thesis had focused on threat assessment in public spaces, and sometimes her brain saw patterns that didn't exist. But then she caught the bartender, Tommy, who'd worked at Aurelius longer than anyone, exchanging a weighted glance with the walnut crusher at the bar, and her stomach dropped. Tommy never looked at customers that way. Tommy, who told terrible jokes and always asked about her student loans and had 2 kids in private school. Lena's hands went cold. She was refilling water glasses at table 4 when she heard it. Just 3 words, whispered into a phone by the fake businessman near the window. 9:30, outside, confirmed. 9:30 was when Marcus Vale left. Every Friday. Without variation. Lena's mind raced through possibilities. Call the police? And say what? She had a feeling? By the time they took her seriously, if they took her seriously, whatever was happening would be finished. Tell her manager? Stephen would laugh, tell her she'd been reading too many thrillers, and she'd look like an idiot when nothing happened. Except something was going to happen. She knew it the way she knew rain from the smell of wet concrete, the way she knew when someone was lying by the micro-expressions they couldn't control. Marcus Vale was going to walk out at 9:30, and these 3 men were going to make sure he never made it to his car. It was 9:23. Lena picked up a water pitcher with hands that barely shook. She'd spent 6 years studying human behavior, learning to read situations, understanding threat patterns. All of it was academic until this moment, until she had to decide whether her analysis was worth risking her life over. She thought about Marcus Vale. She'd never spoken to him beyond taking his order. He'd never been rude, never been particularly friendly. He existed in her world as a pleasant, reliable regular who made Friday night slightly more predictable. She thought about the three men positioned around the dining room like points on a compass, about Tommy's uncharacteristic nervousness, about the whispered countdown. 7 minutes. Lena walked toward table 7. Marcus Vale looked up as she approached, his expression neutral but somehow aware in a way that made her reassess everything she thought she knew about him. Up close, his eyes were darker than she'd realized. Not quite black, but close. They focused on her with complete attention, as if she was the only person in the room. "Can I get you anything else, sir?" Her voice came out steady, professional, normal. "No, thank you." His voice matched everything else about him. Controlled, polite, utterly unremarkable. Lena set the water pitcher down, leaned in slightly, as if checking his empty plate, dropped her voice to barely above a whisper. "Don't leave at 9:30. She watched his face for reaction. There was none. He might have been carved from marble. "I'm sorry?" His tone remained pleasant, conversational, but something shifted in his posture. Some infinitesimal tightening of muscles that suggested coiled readiness. The man at the bar. The couple at table 9, the businessman by the window. Lena's words came faster now, urgency bleeding through her professional mask. "They've been watching you all night. They're not watching you now because they don't want to be obvious, but they're positioned to cover every exit. Someone just confirmed 9:30 as your departure time." Marcus Vale studied her face with an intensity that should have been uncomfortable but somehow wasn't. He was reading her the same way she read other people, cataloging every micro-expression and nervous tick. "Why are you telling me this?" "Not what are you talking about, or you're mistaken. Just that one question, asked with genuine curiosity." "Because I think they're going to kill you." The words tasted surreal in her mouth. "And I might be completely wrong, but if I'm right and I said nothing, I'd never forgive myself." For 3 endless seconds, Marcus Vale said nothing. The restaurant continued around them. Laughter from table 12, the clink of silverware, someone ordering champagne. Normal life, completely oblivious to the conversation happening at table 7. Then Marcus smiled. It wasn't a pleasant smile. It was the kind of smile a wolf might give before teaching a rabbit about the food chain. "Stay quiet," he said softly. "Don't move." He pulled his phone from his jacket with his left hand. His right, Lena noticed, stayed below the table, and sent a single text. Just 2 characters. Whatever he wrote, it was enough. The next 60 seconds unfolded like a choreographed dance. The walnut crusher at the bar stood, reaching inside his jacket. He made it halfway to his feet before a man Lena had never noticed, had he been there all along, appeared behind him and drove him back down onto the bar stool with a hand clamped on his shoulder. The movement looked friendly from a distance. Up close, the crusher's face went white with pain. The couple at table 9 moved simultaneously. The woman's hand dove into her purse. She never reached what she was going for. A waiter Lena didn't recognize materialized beside their table, gripping the woman's wrist with one hand while removing something from her purse with the other. His smile never wavered, as if he was simply helping with a dropped napkin. The fake businessman by the window actually got his weapon clear. Lena caught the matte black gleam of a pistol emerging from under the table, before the maitre d', a dignified man named Philippe, who Lena would have bet money was 70 if he was a day, moved with shocking speed and precision. One sharp strike to the businessman's wrist. The gun clattered to the floor. Philippe kicked it smoothly under the table, all while maintaining a conversation with approaching customers about their reservation. The entire sequence took less than 15 seconds. To anyone not paying attention, nothing had happened at all. Lena stood frozen beside table 7, the water pitcher forgotten in her hand, watching her understanding of the world fundamentally reorganize itself. "Breathe," Marcus said quietly. He was watching her now instead of the room, and there was something almost kind in his expression. "You were right. That was observant of you." "Who are you?" The question came out as barely a whisper. "Someone who appreciates smart people who trust their instincts." He stood, dropping cash on the table, far more than 25% this time. "I'm afraid we need to leave now. You're coming with me." It wasn't a question. "I'm working. I can't just—" "Lena." The use of her name, had he known it all along? Or had he just learned it? Stopped her protest. "The men who just tried to kill me watched you warn me. They know your face. They saw you speak to me. In about 10 minutes, when they realize their plan failed, they're going to start asking questions about who interfered. The implication hit her like cold water. I'm a witness. You're a complication they'll want to resolve. Marcus buttoned his jacket with precise, unhurried movements. My car is outside. We're going to walk out together, calmly and professionally. When we reach the sidewalk, you're going to get in the back seat without hesitation. Everything else we'll handle. Lena looked around the restaurant with new eyes, seeing the security she'd somehow missed all night. The waiter who wasn't really a waiter. The maitre d' who moved like special forces. The various customers who sat too alertly, watched too carefully, positioned themselves too strategically. How many people here work for you? Enough. Marcus placed a hand on the small of her back, guiding her toward the entrance. His touch was light but absolutely firm, the kind of contact that communicated this wasn't negotiable. Walk normally. Smile if you can manage it. We're just a customer and his server heading outside. Lena's mind spun through options. She could scream, cause a scene, refuse to go. But Marcus was right. She'd seen the attempted attack, she'd interfered, and whoever wanted him dead wouldn't appreciate her involvement. Going with Marcus was dangerous, staying was potentially fatal. She walked. The night air hit her face with startling clarity. Chicago in October carried that specific chill that promised winter wasn't far off. The street buzzed with Friday night energy, couples heading to shows, groups laughing their way toward bars, normal people living normal lives. A black sedan waited at the curb, engine running. The driver's window was tinted too dark to see through. The back door opened as they approached. Miss Harper, Marcus gestured toward the interior. Please. Lena looked back at the restaurant one last time. Through the windows, she could see her coworkers moving through their routines, oblivious, Stephen chatting with customers, Maria balancing 3 plates on one arm, Tommy behind the bar, looking paler than usual, but otherwise fine. Her normal life, right there. All she had to do was walk away, go back inside, pretend this night never happened. Except they'd seen her face. Marcus had said so, and she believed him. Lena got in the car. Marcus slid in beside her as the door closed. The interior smelled like leather and something expensive she couldn't identify. The driver pulled into traffic with the smooth competence of someone who'd made this exact journey 1,000 times before. Where are we going? Lena's voice came out steadier than she felt. Somewhere safe. Marcus pulled out his phone, typing rapidly. You'll stay there until we've addressed the immediate situation. And then? He looked at her, and for the first time she saw something almost like regret in his expression. That depends on several factors. Whether these people have additional resources, whether they can identify you beyond your face, whether they're willing to pursue someone who isn't directly involved in my business. What is your business? But Lena already knew. People didn't have this level of security, this many trained operatives disguised as restaurant staff, this kind of casual familiarity with assassination attempts, unless their business was exactly what she suspected. Nothing you want to be involved in, Marcus said quietly, which is why you're going to stay somewhere secure while my people ensure you can return to your normal life safely. The car moved through Chicago's streets with purpose. Lena recognized the route initially. They were heading toward the Gold Coast, but after several turns into increasingly private areas, she lost her bearings completely. Her phone buzzed. Text from Stephen. Where'd you go? People asking for their server. Reality crashed back. She had tables. Tips she needed. Student loans that didn't care about assassination attempts. I just left work. They're going to fire me. I'll handle it. Marcus held out his hand. Your phone, please. What? No. Miss Harper. His tone remained patient, but something beneath it suggested he was accustomed to being obeyed. The people who tried to kill me tonight are professionals. If they want to find you, your phone is the fastest way. We need to eliminate that vulnerability. Lena clutched her phone tighter. It contained her entire life, contacts, photos, her thesis research, everything. Handing it over felt like surrendering her last connection to normalcy. I can track phones, a voice said from the front seat. The driver, speaking for the first time. Can't track someone who doesn't have one. Boss is right. You'll get it back, Marcus assured her. Clean, secure, and functional, but for now, it's a liability. Slowly, reluctantly, Lena placed her phone in his hand. Marcus powered it down and slipped it into his jacket pocket. The car turned into an underground garage, concrete walls, dim lighting. The kind of place that looked exactly the same as 1,000 other parking structures except for the security checkpoint they passed, the armed guard who nodded at Marcus, and the elevator that required both a keycard and a thumbprint to operate. "This is excessive for a safe house," Lena observed as they stepped into the elevator. "This is my home," Marcus corrected. "The safe house is elsewhere, but we need to debrief first, and I prefer familiar ground for that conversation." The elevator rose smoothly, silently. Lena watched the floor numbers climb, past 10, past 20, past 30. When they finally stopped, Marcus led her into a penthouse that redefined her understanding of wealth. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Chicago's skyline. The furnishings were minimal but exquisite. Each piece looked like it belonged in a museum. Art she couldn't identify but suspected cost more than her entire education hung on the walls. 3 people waited in the living room, 2 men and 1 woman, all watching Lena with the kind of assessment that made her feel like a specimen under glass. "Clear?" Marcus asked. "Building's secure," the woman replied. She was petite, around 40, with sharp eyes that tracked Lena's every movement. Ran facial recognition on her. She's exactly who she says she is. Lena Harper, 26, graduate student at Northwestern, works at Aurelius 3 nights a week. No criminal record, no concerning associations. Exactly the profile of someone who'd spot a pattern and actually speak up. The casual invasion of her privacy should have been more shocking. Somehow, it barely registered anymore. "Threat assessment?" Marcus shrugged out of his jacket, revealing a shoulder holster Lena definitely hadn't noticed at the restaurant. "The team neutralized the immediate actors," one of the men answered. He was older, maybe 50, with the bearing of former military. "Tommy's been handled. He cooperated fully, gave us the name of who approached him, how much they paid, what the plan was. The others are being questioned now." "Tommy." Lena's voice came out hollow. "Tommy has kids. He tells jokes about his kids' terrible art projects." "Tommy also accepted $15,000 to help kill me," Marcus said without inflection. "His financial circumstances made him vulnerable to recruitment. That's unfortunate, but not an excuse." "What does handled mean?" Lena demanded. "What does being questioned mean?" The room went quiet. The 3 operatives looked at Marcus, who studied Lena with that same careful attention he'd given her in the restaurant. "It means," he said slowly, "that we're gathering intelligence about who orchestrated tonight's attempt and ensuring it doesn't happen again. The specifics aren't something you need to worry about. Because you're keeping me separate from it. Understanding crystallized. You're keeping me clean so I can go back to my normal life." "Exactly. And Tommy, the others? What happens to them?" Marcus's expression didn't change. "That depends on what they know and who they're working for. But Miss Harper, I need you to understand something clearly. Those people accepted money to help murder me. Whatever consequences they face, they earned through their choices." Lena wanted to argue, wanted to defend Tommy, who'd always been kind to her, who'd shown her photos of his kids' school plays. But Tommy had also watched Marcus every Friday, cataloging his patterns, selling that information to people who wanted him dead. The cognitive dissonance made her head hurt. "Sophia," Marcus nodded at the woman, "get her settled in the East guest suite. Make sure she has everything she needs." "This way," Sophia said, not unkindly. She led Lena down a hallway lined with more expensive art, past rooms whose purposes Lena could only guess at, finally stopping at a bedroom that was larger than her entire apartment. "Bathroom's through there," Sophia indicated. "Closet stocked with basics if you need anything. Kitchen's down the hall. Help yourself to whatever. Don't try to leave the penthouse. Don't approach the windows. Don't use any electronic devices if you happen to find one." "I'm a prisoner." "You're protected," Sophia corrected. "There's a difference. The people who wanted Marcus dead tonight will investigate what went wrong. When they do, your name might surface. Until we're certain you're not a target, this is the safest place for you." She left before Lena could respond, closing the door with a soft click. Alone for the first time since the car ride, Lena sat on the edge of the bed and tried to process what had happened. This morning, she'd woken up worried about her thesis defense, Tonight, she was locked in a penthouse owned by someone who employed enough security personnel to staff a small army because she'd noticed an assassination plot and been stupid enough to interfere. The bed was absurdly comfortable. The room was temperature perfect. Through the bathroom door, she could see marble countertops and fixtures that probably cost more than her car. She was trapped in luxury by a man who carried a gun to dinner, and she had no idea when or if she'd be allowed to leave. Lena stood and walked to the window despite Sophia's warning. Chicago glittered below, millions of lights marking millions of lives. Normal lives, safe lives. Lives that didn't include assassination attempts or armed security or being held for her own protection. She pressed her palm against the glass and wondered what she'd been thinking in that restaurant. Why hadn't she just minded her own business? Why had she convinced herself that her analysis was worth risking everything over? Because you were right, a small voice answered. You saw what was happening, and you acted, and you saved someone's life. The question was whether she'd destroyed her own in the process. A knock on the door interrupted her spiraling thoughts. Miss Harper? Marcus's voice, calm and professional. May I come in? It's your house. He entered carrying a tray with tea and what looked like high-end takeout. You missed dinner. I thought you might be hungry. The smell hit her, pad thai, her favorite, and her stomach growled traitorously. How did you know what I like? Sophia's very thorough. Marcus set the tray on the desk near the window. She pulled your usual orders from the Thai place near campus. Said this was your standard Friday night meal after late shifts. The casual surveillance should have been creepier. Instead, Lena found herself oddly touched that he'd bothered to feed her something familiar rather than whatever rich people normally ate. Thank you, she said quietly. Marcus nodded, moving to leave. Wait. Lena wasn't sure what made her speak. Can I ask you something? He turned back, his expression neutral. You can ask. Were you ever actually in danger, or did you know about the attempt before you even arrived at the restaurant? Something flickered across Marcus's face. Surprise, maybe, or respect. What makes you think I knew? Your security team was already in place. The waiter, the maitre d', probably others I didn't spot. You weren't surprised when I warned you, just interested, like you were watching to see what I'd do. Lena studied him, applying every technique she'd learned about reading people. You let it play out because you wanted to identify everyone involved. I wasn't saving your life. I was just confirming what you already suspected. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his tone carried something that might have been approval. We had intelligence about a possible attempt. Didn't know the specific timing or method. Your warning filled in gaps and confirmed our suspicions about internal involvement. So I was useful. You were brave and observant. And yes, useful. He paused. Most people would have assumed they were imagining things or convinced themselves it wasn't their problem. You trusted your analysis enough to take action. That's rare. Is that why you brought me here instead of just, I don't know, putting me in a hotel somewhere? I brought you here because you're in danger, and I'm responsible for that danger. Marcus's voice carried absolute certainty. But you're right that I'm also curious about you. Someone with your skills, someone who notices what others miss and acts on that information, that's valuable. I'm not interested in whatever you're offering. I haven't offered anything. Marcus moved toward the door again. Eat, rest. Tomorrow we'll know more about the threat level and can plan accordingly. He was almost through the door when Lena spoke again. Marcus? What did you do? What did you do that made people willing to pay Tommy $15,000 to help kill you? He looked back at her, and for just a moment she saw something ancient and tired in his eyes, something that had seen too much and done worse. I built an empire, he said simply, and empires make enemies. That's the nature of what I do. Then he was gone, leaving Lena alone with pad thai and questions she wasn't sure she wanted answered. She ate because she was hungry, and because the food was there, and because her body demanded normalcy even when her mind couldn't process what was happening. The pad thai tasted exactly like it always did, perfectly spiced, familiar comfort food that belonged to her old life, her normal life, the one that was slipping further away with every passing hour. Lena thought about her thesis on threat assessment in public spaces. All those hours of research, all those theoretical frameworks for identifying danger. She'd never imagined actually using any of it. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd spent years studying how to recognize threats, and the first time she'd applied that knowledge practically, it had landed her in a gilded cage owned by a man who built empires in ways that required armed security at restaurants. Through the window, Chicago continued its Friday night routine, completely unaware that anything unusual had happened. Somewhere out there, her coworkers were closing down Aurelius, counting tips, complaining about difficult customers. Her roommate was probably wondering why she wasn't answering texts. Her advisor expected her thesis draft Monday morning. All of it existed in a different world now, a world Lena could see but no longer touch. She finished eating and changed into the clothes Sophia had mentioned, designer loungewear that fit perfectly because of course it did. The bathroom was stocked with toiletries that cost more than her monthly grocery budget. Everything was designed for comfort, for luxury, for making captivity feel like a five-star hotel. But the door was still locked from the outside. And somewhere in this penthouse, Marcus Vale was making decisions about her future, decisions she had no control over, no input into, no way to influence. Lena lay down on the impossibly comfortable bed and stared at the ceiling, trying to figure out how a simple warning in a restaurant had turned into this, trying to understand what happened next, trying not to think about Tommy's kids or the three people being questioned or what handling the situation actually meant, trying not to wonder if she'd still be here tomorrow or next week, or whether protection was just another word for something else entirely. Sleep should have been impossible. Instead, exhaustion pulled her under within minutes, dragging her into dreams where she ran through restaurants trying to warn people who wouldn't listen, while shadows with guns closed in from every direction. When she woke, sunlight streamed through the windows, and Chicago glittered below like it always did, beautiful and bright and completely unreachable. The morning light felt like an accusation. Lena had spent the night in a stranger's penthouse, wearing borrowed clothes, eating food someone had researched for her, all because she'd made one decision in a restaurant that had seemed so clear at the time. Now, watching Chicago wake up through windows she couldn't open, clarity felt like a luxury from another life. She found the kitchen by following the smell of coffee. The penthouse looked different in daylight, still expensive, still intimidating, but somehow more real. Less like a movie set and more like a place where someone actually lived, even if that someone employed enough security to invade a small country. Sophia sat at the kitchen island reading something on a tablet, a cup of coffee steaming beside her. She looked up when Lena entered, her expression neutral but not unfriendly. "There's coffee," Sophia said, gesturing to a machine that looked complicated enough to require a pilot's license. "Or I can make you something else. Tea, juice, whatever you need." "Coffee's fine." Lena approached the machine cautiously. "Does this thing require a manual?" The ghost of a smile crossed Sophia's face. "Here." She stood and demonstrated a series of button presses that produced a perfect espresso. "Marcus insists on the complicated European models. Says American coffee machines lack character." "Does he always get what he insists on?" "Usually." Sophia returned to her tablet. "You slept well?" "Better than I should have." Lena accepted the espresso, letting the warmth seep into her hands. "What time is it?" "Almost 9. Marcus wanted to let you sleep. Said you'd had a difficult night." The casual mention of Marcus, the easy familiarity, reminded Lena that Sophia worked for him, that everyone in this building probably worked for him in some capacity. She was surrounded by people whose loyalty was already purchased, already secure, already pointing in a direction that had nothing to do with her well-being. Where is he? Handling the situation from last night. Sophia's tone remained neutral, giving nothing away. He'll brief you when he's finished. Until then, you're free to move around the penthouse. There's a gym on the lower level if you want to work out, a library if you prefer reading, or you can stay here. Whatever makes you comfortable. Except leaving. Except leaving, Sophia confirmed without apology. The people who targeted Marcus are currently being very carefully questioned about who hired them and why. Until we know more, you stay put. Lena sipped her espresso, buying time to organize her thoughts. What happens if they don't talk? Or if whoever hired them decides to cut their losses and come after witnesses anyway? Then Marcus handles it. Sophia's voice carried absolute confidence. That's what he does. He handles things that threaten what's his. I'm not his. You became his responsibility the moment you warned him. Sophia met Lena's eyes directly. He takes that seriously. Whatever else you think about him or his business, understand that much is true. He protects what's his. Before Lena could respond, her phone, the one Marcus had confiscated last night, appeared on the counter between them. Sophia slid it across with one finger. Cleaned, secured, and loaded with a secondary encryption system. Your contacts are intact, your data's untouched, but now all communications route through a secure network. If anyone tries to track you, they'll hit a wall. Lena picked up the phone cautiously, as if it might explode. You went through all my personal information. We verified you weren't a threat. There's a difference. Sophia's tone suggested this distinction mattered to her. Your thesis research is interesting, by the way. The section on behavioral indicators of premeditated violence was particularly well-reasoned. The violation should have felt worse. Instead, Lena found herself oddly grateful to have her phone back, even if it came with invisible strings attached. She unlocked it and saw a flood of messages. Her roommate increasingly worried, Stephen from work increasingly angry, her thesis advisor wondering where her draft was. I need to respond to these people. They're going to think I'm dead or crazy. Respond. Sophia returned to her tablet. Just don't mention where you are or what happened. Marcus will handle your work situation. As for your roommate and advisor, tell them you had a family emergency and needed to leave town suddenly. Keep it vague. Lena stared at the messages, trying to figure out how to condense last night into something that sounded normal. Hey, sorry I disappeared. Witnessed an assassination attempt and got pulled into protective custody by a crime boss. Back soon. She settled for something simpler, texting her roommate first. Family emergency. Had to leave town fast. Phone was dead. I'm okay. Will explain when I can. The response came within seconds. Lena. Oh my God, I was about to call hospitals. Are you okay? What happened? Where are you? Can't talk about it right now. Everything's fine, I promise. Just need a few days. She sent similar messages to her advisor and a couple of close friends, each one feeling like a small betrayal of the truth. When she finished, she looked up to find Sophia watching her with something that might have been sympathy. It gets easier, Sophia said quietly. The lying, the compartmentalizing. Eventually, you stop feeling guilty about it. How long have you worked for him? 12 years, started as a data analyst, moved into operations management. Now I handle security logistics and personnel vetting. Sophia's expression turned distant, remembering. I was good at my job, had offers from Fortune 500 companies, all the conventional success markers. Then I met Marcus and realized I'd been playing in the kiddie pool my whole career. And you're okay with what he does? I'm okay with who he is. Sophia's voice carried conviction. Marcus operates in a world with different rules. He doesn't apologize for it, doesn't pretend to be something he's not. There's integrity in that honesty, even if the work itself exists in moral gray areas. Lena thought about Marcus's calm acknowledgement last night. I built an empire, delivered without shame or justification, just a statement of fact, as neutral as discussing the weather. What kind of empire? The kind that functions because people like me make sure the details are handled correctly. Sophia smiled slightly. You're asking the wrong questions, though. You want to know if you should be afraid of him, if staying here makes you complicit in something terrible, if the protection he's offering comes with strings you can't see yet. The accuracy of the observation stung. And what are the right questions? Ask yourself what you saw last night, not what you think you saw, but what actually happened. Sophia leaned forward slightly. 3 professionals tried to kill Marcus in a public place. His security neutralized them without firing a shot, without causing panic, without anyone else in that restaurant even noticing. Tommy, who betrayed him for money, is alive this morning to regret his choices. The servers and customers who had nothing to do with it went home safe. Marcus could have handled it differently, violently, publicly. He chose precision instead. That's supposed to make me feel better? It's supposed to make you think. Sophia stood, collecting her tablet. Most people in Marcus's position would have killed everyone in that restaurant just to be certain they got all the threats. He didn't. He controlled the situation with minimal collateral damage. That tells you something about who he is when he has power. She left Lena alone in the kitchen with coffee that had gone cold and thoughts that wouldn't settle. The library turned out to be exactly what someone like Marcus would own: floor-to-ceiling shelves filled with first editions and rare volumes, comfortable leather chairs positioned near windows that offered views of the city. Lena ran her fingers along the spines, recognizing titles from her undergraduate education: philosophy, history, psychology, strategy texts that probably shouldn't be in civilian hands. Sophia said I'd find you here. Lena turned to find Marcus in the doorway, looking substantially less polished than last night. He'd changed into casual clothes, jeans and a dark Henley that somehow made him look more dangerous than the expensive suit had. There was tension in his shoulders that suggested the morning's work had been difficult. How did it go? Lena asked. The questioning? Productively. Marcus moved into the library, selecting a chair across from where Lena stood. We have names, connections, enough information to understand who wanted me dead and why. And the people you questioned are no longer a threat. His tone made it clear the subject wasn't open for discussion. More importantly, we've confirmed that your identity hasn't been compromised. The people who planned last night's attempt didn't know who interfered, just that someone did. As long as you stay out of sight for a few days while we resolve the larger situation, you should be able to return to your normal life safely. Relief flooded through Lena, followed immediately by something more complicated. So I just go home? Pretend none of this happened? Essentially. Marcus studied her with that same careful attention from last night. Your job at Aurelius is handled. Stephen believes you had a family medical emergency and needed to leave town. You'll receive 2 weeks paid leave and a glowing recommendation if you choose to work elsewhere. Your thesis advisor has been informed of the same emergency and granted you a 2-week extension on your draft deadline. The efficiency of it was staggering. You arranged all of that since last night? I have resources. It seemed the least I could do, considering you saved my life. Sophia said you already knew about the attempt. Knowing something might happen and having confirmation it's actually happening are different things. Marcus leaned back in his chair, looking genuinely relaxed for the first time since she'd met him. Your warning allowed us to control the situation more precisely. That's worth compensating. I don't want compensation. I just want to understand what I walked into. Lena moved closer, pulled by curiosity stronger than caution. Who were those people? Why did they want you dead? Marcus was quiet for a long moment, as if weighing how much truth she could handle. When he spoke, his voice carried the same neutral honesty from last night. I control significant portions of Chicago's underground economy, import-export operations that don't appear on official manifests, financial systems that move money without traditional banking oversight, information networks that powerful people pay substantial sums to access. He paused, watching her reaction. The people who tried to kill me last night represent a competing organization that wants those operations for themselves. This isn't personal. It's business. Business that involves murder. Business that involves risk, Marcus corrected. Everyone who works for me understands those risks. Everyone who works against me accepts them. You're the only person in this situation who didn't choose to be here. Lena absorbed this, trying to reconcile the calm, articulate man in front of her with the criminal enterprise he'd just described. And you're just telling me this? Aren't you worried I'll go to the police? With what evidence? Your testimony that I mentioned having business interests? Marcus smiled slightly. The police have been investigating me for years. They have nothing because there's nothing to find that would survive legal scrutiny. I'm very good at what I do, Miss Harper. That's why people want me dead. Lena, if you're going to confess to crimes, at least use my first name. The smile widened. Lena, then. And I'm not confessing. I'm providing context so you understand the situation clearly. You deserve that much after what you've been through. She should have been more frightened, should have been backing away, demanding to leave, insisting on her normal life. Instead, Lena found herself sitting down in the chair opposite Marcus, drawn into the conversation despite every instinct that screamed danger. Sophia's been with you 12 years, Lena said. The security team last night moved like they've worked together forever. You have people willing to die for you. That's not just business. No, Marcus agreed. It's not. The people who work for me are loyal because I value loyalty above almost everything else. I pay well. I protect what's mine. And I don't ask anyone to take risks I wouldn't take myself. Is that why you kept going to the restaurant, even knowing someone might try to kill you there? I kept going because changing patterns signals fear, and fear invites aggression. His voice carried absolute conviction. In my world, predictability can be a weapon if you control the surrounding variables. I knew that restaurant was secure. I knew my team was positioned properly. I knew the risk was manageable, except for the variable of Tommy. Something hard flashed across Marcus's face. Tommy was a mistake. I should have caught his financial vulnerability earlier. That failure nearly cost lives. What happened to him? Lena asked quietly. Really happened. He's alive. He cooperated fully, provided valuable intelligence, and he'll receive a severance package that includes college funds for his children. Marcus's tone suggested this generosity had limits. He'll also never work in this city again, and he understands that any future betrayal would end differently. That's more mercy than I expected. I'm not a monster, Lena. I'm a businessman who operates in an environment where violence is sometimes necessary. There's a difference. He leaned forward slightly. The men who tried to kill me last night. They knew what they were signing up for. They accepted money to commit murder. Tommy just provided information under financial duress. Context matters. Lena studied him, trying to apply everything she'd learned about reading people to the man across from her. Marcus met her gaze steadily, apparently comfortable being examined. There was intelligence there, and control, and something that might have been loneliness buried deep beneath the careful exterior. What happens now? She asked finally. Now you stay here for another few days while we resolve the larger conflict. You finish your thesis draft. Sophia mentioned you needed a quiet place to write, and the library's yours if you want it. When it's safe, you go home. You defend your thesis. You graduate. You build whatever life you were building before last night interrupted it. And you? I handled the people who thought they could take what's mine. No emotion in his voice, just certainty. That's what I do. The finality of it should have ended the conversation. Instead, Lena heard herself asking, "Can I watch?" Marcus's expression shifted, surprise, quickly masked. Watch what? You said you handle things. I assume that means meetings, negotiations, whatever you do when you're resolving conflicts. The words came faster now, driven by curiosity she couldn't quite justify. My thesis is about threat assessment and violence prevention. Everything I've studied has been theoretical, but you live this every day. I want to understand how it actually works. That's not a good idea. Why? You said I'm not in danger. You said your security is solid. Let me observe. Let me see what happens when theory meets reality. Lena leaned forward, matching his intensity. I noticed those men last night because I spent 6 years studying behavioral patterns. Maybe I could be useful. Maybe I could spot things your security team misses. Absolutely not. Marcus stood abruptly. You're here for protection, not recruitment. When this is over, you go back to your safe, normal life. That's not negotiable. Because you've decided what's best for me. Because I know what this world costs. His voice hardened. I've seen what it does to people who aren't built for it. You warned me in a restaurant because you're fundamentally decent. You trust your instincts and you act to protect people. Those are good qualities. They're also qualities that get destroyed very quickly in my business. You don't know what I'm built for. I know you spent last night in a guest room instead of a safe house because I made a selfish choice to keep you close. Marcus's admission came out rough. I know you're interesting and observant and brave, and I know that letting you deeper into this world would be the worst thing I could do for you. The honesty was startling. Lena stood, moving closer without quite meaning to. What if I want to make that choice myself? Then I'd question your judgment. But Marcus didn't step back. Lena, what you saw last night was contained, controlled. Most of what I do isn't that clean. Most of it involves hard decisions and harder consequences. You think you want to understand it, but understanding means complicity. It means knowing things you can't unknow. I already know things I can't unknow. I watched your team neutralize 3 people in 15 seconds. I heard you describe Tommy's punishment like you were discussing a business transaction. I'm living in your penthouse surrounded by security that costs more than most people make in a year. Lena held his gaze. Maybe I don't want to go back to pretending the world is safe and normal when I know it's not. Marcus studied her for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. You have no idea what you're asking for. Then show me. The silence stretched between them, charged with possibility and danger in equal measure. Finally, Marcus shook his head slowly. Finish your thesis draft. We'll discuss this again when you've had time to think clearly. He moved toward the door, then paused. Sophia will bring you lunch. If you need anything else, ask her. The library's yours for as long as you're here. He left before Lena could argue, his footsteps fading down the hallway. She stood alone among the books, her heart racing with adrenaline and something else she couldn't quite name. She'd just asked a criminal to let her observe his business. She'd pushed back against his protection. She'd suggested she wanted to stay in his world instead of escaping it. The smart thing would be to back down. Accept the safe return to normal life he was offering. Finish her thesis, get her degree, forget any of this happened. But Lena had spent 6 years studying theoretical frameworks for understanding violence and threat assessment. Last night, she'd applied that theory and saved someone's life. This morning, she'd learned that the world she thought she understood was just a comfortable fiction covering much darker realities. She wasn't sure she could go back to the fiction anymore. Wasn't sure she wanted to. Lena pulled her laptop from her bag. Sophia must have retrieved it from her apartment, along with clothes and toiletries that now filled the guest room closet, and settled into one of the leather chairs. The thesis draft stared back at her from the screen, full of careful academic language about identifying dangerous situations and preventing violence. She'd prevented violence last night. She'd seen professionals operate with precision she'd only theorized about. She'd met someone who lived in the exact space between order and chaos that her research attempted to map. And she wanted to know more. The admission felt like stepping off a cliff, but Lena couldn't deny it anymore. Marcus was right. She was fundamentally decent. She did trust her instincts. She did act to protect people. But she was also curious, analytical, driven to understand systems that most people preferred to ignore. Maybe that made her exactly wrong for his world. Or maybe it made her exactly right. Lena opened a new document and started writing, but not about her thesis. Instead, she cataloged everything she'd observed since last night: the positioning of the men in the restaurant, the response patterns of Marcus's security team, the way information had been extracted and used, the balance between mercy and punishment in Tommy's case. She wrote for hours, filling pages with observations and analysis, applying her academic training to real-world scenarios. When Sophia brought lunch, salad and grilled chicken that somehow matched Lena's usual healthy choices, she barely looked up. Making progress? Sophia asked, setting the tray down. Maybe. I'm not sure yet. Lena saved her work. Can I ask you something? Depends on the question. When you started working for Marcus, did you know what you were getting into, or did you figure it out gradually? Sophia considered this carefully. I knew he operated outside conventional boundaries. I didn't know the full scope until I was already invested. By then, I'd seen enough to understand that his version of order made more sense to me than the chaos everyone else called normal. She paused. Why? Just trying to understand how people end up here, in this life. Most people don't choose it consciously. They make one decision that seems reasonable at the time, then another, then another. Eventually, they look around and realize they're somewhere completely different from where they started. Sophia's expression softened slightly. Is that what you're afraid of? That you'll wake up one day and not recognize yourself? Maybe. Or maybe I'm afraid I'll recognize myself perfectly and not like what I see. That's the smarter fear. Sophia moved toward the door. Marcus is in meetings all afternoon. If you want to talk to him again, he'll be free around 6. What kind of meetings? The kind where he handles situations. Sophia's tone made it clear she wouldn't elaborate. Eat your lunch. The library will still be here later. After she left, Lena tried to focus on her thesis, but kept getting distracted by what might be happening elsewhere in the building. Meetings, situations being handled, people making decisions about violence and business and consequences. She ate mechanically, her mind elsewhere. When her phone buzzed with a message from her roommate asking when she'd be back, Lena stared at it for a long time before responding. Not sure yet. Soon, probably. How's everything there? Boring without you. Also, your advisor called the apartment looking for you. I told him what you said about the family emergency. He seemed concerned but understanding. Thanks for covering. I owe you. You owe me details when you get back. This is the most mysterious you've ever been, and it's killing me. Lena smiled despite everything. I promise. When I can explain, I will. She set the phone down and returned to her laptop, but the cursor blinked uselessly on the screen. Her thesis suddenly felt irrelevant. Theoretical frameworks for understanding violence when she was living in a penthouse owned by someone who managed violence as a business strategy. The cognitive dissonance was overwhelming. Around 5:30, Lena gave up on writing and wandered through the penthouse. She found the gym Sophia had mentioned, state-of-the-art equipment that looked barely used, and a media room with a screen that covered an entire wall. Every space was immaculate, expensive, and oddly impersonal, as if Marcus lived here but didn't actually inhabit it. She ended up back in the library, watching Chicago transition from afternoon to evening through the huge windows. The city looked different from this height, manageable, comprehensible, like a detailed map instead of the chaotic reality she knew existed at street level. Beautiful view. Lena turned to find Marcus in the doorway again, looking tired in a way that suggested his afternoon had been difficult. There was tension in his jaw, and something dark in his expression that hadn't been there this morning. Meetings went well? She asked carefully. Meetings went necessarily. He moved to the window beside her, keeping a careful distance. The situation is resolved. You'll be able to go home in a couple of days. That's good. Lena wasn't sure if she meant it. Did anyone else get hurt? No one who didn't accept that risk when they entered this business. Marcus's voice carried the same flat neutrality from earlier, but underneath it Lena heard exhaustion. It's finished. You don't sound happy about it. I'm not. He turned to look at her directly. I'm relieved, satisfied that threats have been addressed. But happy? No. This is just what I do, what has to be done. The honesty surprised her. Do you ever regret it? Building this empire? Marcus was quiet for a long time, staring out at Chicago as it lit up against the darkening sky. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than she'd heard before. I regret what it costs, the people I've lost, the compromises I've made, the version of myself I had to become to survive in this world. He paused. But I don't regret the power, the ability to protect what's mine, the capacity to create order where there would otherwise be chaos. That's worth the cost. Even when the cost is measured in lives, even then, no hesitation. I know that makes me a monster to some people, but I'd rather be a monster who controls his territory than a good man who watches everything burn. Lena processed this, trying to reconcile his words with the man who'd made sure Tommy's children had college funds. You're not a monster. You're just honest about what you are. Is there a difference? I think so. Monsters don't question themselves. They don't get tired. They don't show up looking exhausted after handling situations they wish they didn't have to handle. She moved slightly closer. You're just a person operating in impossible circumstances. That's not the same thing. Marcus looked at her with something that might have been gratitude. You see things very clearly for someone who's been in this world less than 24 hours. I've spent 6 years studying behavioral patterns and threat assessment. I know how to read people. Lena held his gaze. And I know you're not what you pretend to be. What am I pretending to be? Comfortable with this. Content with the violence and the isolation and the constant threat. But you're not. You're just good at it, and that's not the same as wanting it. The observation landed hard. Marcus's expression shifted through several emotions before settling on something carefully neutral. You should stop reading me so accurately. It's dangerous for both of us. Why? Because it makes me want things I can't have. His voice dropped lower. Like keeping you here, teaching you everything I know, showing you how this world really works instead of sending you back to safety like I should. Lena's heart rate spiked. What if I don't want to go back to safety? Then I'd be responsible for destroying something good. Marcus stepped back deliberately. And I've destroyed enough already. He left again before she could respond, disappearing into the penthouse like a ghost. Lena stood alone by the window, watching the city lights blur slightly as her eyes adjusted to the darkness. She'd pushed too far, seen too much, asked questions she shouldn't have asked, but she'd also gotten the truth. Marcus wanted her to stay, wanted to show her his world, was actively fighting against that desire because he thought it would destroy her. The revelation should have been frightening. Instead, it felt like vindication. Lena returned to her laptop and opened the document she'd been working on all day. Pages of observations and analysis, patterns and predictions, questions she couldn't answer with theory alone. She needed to see more, understand more, push further into this world Marcus was trying to protect her from. The smart thing would be to accept his protection and leave when he said it was safe. But Lena had never been satisfied with the smart thing when there was a more interesting option available. She started writing again, this time with purpose. Not a thesis about theoretical threat assessment, a proposal, a case for why Marcus should let her stay, why her skills could be valuable, why protecting her from the truth was less effective than teaching her to navigate it. She wrote until her eyes burned and her coffee went cold, and the city outside transformed into a constellation of lights against infinite darkness. And somewhere in the penthouse, she knew Marcus was making the same choice she was, whether to play it safe or risk everything for something that might destroy them both. The proposal sat on Lena's laptop screen for 2 days before she showed it to anyone. She refined the arguments, strengthened the logic, removed anything that sounded like emotion disguised as reason. By the time she printed it, using the office setup Sophia had shown her in one of the penthouse's spare rooms, the document read like a professional consulting pitch rather than a desperate plea to stay in a world that terrified and fascinated her in equal measure. Marcus had been scarce since their conversation in the library. Sophia mentioned he was handling the aftermath of the conflict, tying up loose ends, ensuring the resolution stuck. Lena saw him occasionally in passing, early mornings when he returned from wherever he spent his nights, late evenings when he disappeared into his private office and didn't emerge for hours. They exchanged polite nods, careful distance, the unspoken tension from their last real conversation hanging between them like fog. She finished her thesis draft on the 3rd day. The academic writing came easier now that she had real-world context for her theoretical frameworks. She wrote about pattern recognition and threat assessment with newfound authority, carefully avoiding any specific references to what she'd witnessed. Her advisor would never know that the case studies she cited were sanitized versions of an actual assassination attempt she'd helped prevent. When she emailed the draft to Dr. Morrison with an apologetic note about the family emergency, his response came within an hour, effusive with praise for her analysis and relieved she was handling her personal situation. The normalcy of his email felt surreal. Here was her academic life, progressing exactly as planned, completely unaware that she was living in a criminal's penthouse while debating whether to abandon everything she'd worked for. That evening, Lena found Marcus in the library. He stood at the window with a drink in his hand, watching the city with an expression that suggested he was seeing something other than buildings and lights. He didn't turn when she entered, but his posture shifted slightly in acknowledgement. "I finished my thesis," Lena said, moving to stand beside him. "Submitted it this afternoon." "Congratulations. I'm sure it's excellent." His voice carried genuine warmth beneath the formality. "Dr. Morrison should be impressed. You know my advisor's name." "Sophia's thorough." Marcus took a slow sip of his drink. "She also mentioned you've been working on something else, something you wouldn't let her read." Lena's pulse quickened. She'd been careful to keep her proposal private, but of course Sophia would notice. "I have. I wanted to show it to you first." "I'm not sure I want to see it." "Because you already know what it says?" Marcus finally looked at her, and the exhaustion in his eyes was more pronounced than ever. "But say, because I know what you're going to ask for, and I know I should say no, and I'm not confident I have the strength to refuse you." The admission hung between them, raw and honest. Lena pulled the printed proposal from her pocket and set it on the table beside them. "Read it anyway, then decide." He stared at the document like it might detonate. "Lena, in 2 days you go home. Back to your apartment, your friends, your normal life. You defend your thesis, you graduate, you build a career that doesn't involve any of this. That's what should happen." "Should, but not what will happen if you read what I wrote." She kept her voice steady. I'm not asking you to decide right now. I'm asking you to consider the possibility that I could be valuable to your organization, that my skills might fill a gap your current team has, that maybe, just maybe, I'm exactly what you need, even if it's not what either of us expected. Marcus picked up the proposal with obvious reluctance. This is a mistake. Then tell me why after you've read it. He settled into one of the leather chairs and began reading. Lena forced herself to stay calm, watching his face for reactions. His expression remained neutral for the first page, then something shifted. Interest, she thought, or maybe recognition. By the third page, he was reading more slowly, absorbing rather than skimming. When he finished, he set the document down carefully and looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. You want to work for me as a behavioral analyst, reading people during meetings, identifying potential threats before they materialize, vetting new associates for tells that suggest unreliability. His voice was absolutely flat. You've outlined how your academic background makes you uniquely qualified to spot patterns my security team might miss. You've provided examples from the restaurant incident where your observations proved accurate. You've even suggested a trial period with specific deliverables. Yes? This is insane. This is logical, Lena corrected. You said yourself that Tommy was a mistake you should have caught earlier. His financial vulnerability made him a liability. I could have identified that vulnerability. I could have flagged him as a risk before he accepted money to betray you. You could also end up dead, traumatized, or imprisoned. Marcus stood abruptly, pacing to the window. Do you understand what you're actually proposing? This isn't a consulting gig. This is permanent involvement in a criminal enterprise. This is choosing to become complicit in everything I do. I understand better than you think. Lena moved closer, refusing to let him create distance. I've spent 3 days in your world. I've seen how you operate. I've watched Sophia manage security logistics with more precision than most Fortune 500 companies show. I've observed your team function with absolute loyalty and professional competence. This isn't chaos. It's a system. And I want to understand that system from the inside. Why? The question came out harsh. Why would you choose this when you have every opportunity to build something legitimate? Because legitimate doesn't mean real. The words surprised Lena even as she spoke them. I've spent 6 years in academia studying violence and threat assessment like they're abstract concepts. But they're not abstract to you. They're daily reality. And I'm tired of pretending that studying something from a safe distance is the same as actually understanding it. Marcus turned to face her fully, and something dangerous flickered in his expression. You want to understand violence? Fine. Let me tell you what I did yesterday. I sat across from a man who helped plan the attempt on my life. I asked him questions in a very specific order designed to break his resistance. When he finally told me everything I needed to know, I made a choice about whether he lived or died based purely on his value as a future asset versus his liability as a loose end. He moved closer, his voice dropping lower. The day before that, I authorized a financial audit of everyone in my organization who has access to sensitive information. 3 people failed that audit. They're gone now, not dead, but gone in ways that ensure they'll never work in this city again. I destroyed their careers, their reputations, their futures because they represented potential vulnerabilities. Another step closer. Lena held her ground. This morning, I negotiated a truce with the organization that wanted me dead. Part of that negotiation involved identifying which of their people were directly responsible for the restaurant attempt and which were just following orders. The ones who planned it, they won't be a problem anymore. The ones who followed orders get to live, but under terms that essentially make them my assets now. His eyes locked on hers. That's what I do, Lena. I make calculated decisions about human lives based on strategic value. Is that really what you want to be part of? Lena's heart hammered, but she didn't look away. You're trying to scare me. I'm trying to save you from a choice you can't take back. What if I don't want to be saved? She closed the remaining distance between them. What if I've spent my whole life being safe and careful, and playing by rules that don't actually matter? What if watching you operate with that level of precision and control made me realize I've been wasting my potential on theoretical frameworks when I could be applying my skills to something real? This isn't real. It's criminal. It's both. Lena's voice rose slightly. And you don't get to decide what risks I'm willing to take. You don't get to protect me from choices just because you think you know better. I'm 26 years old. I have a master's degree in behavioral psychology, and I'm standing here telling you I want this. That should count for something. Marcus stared at her for a long moment, conflict written across his features. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with something that sounded like pain. It counts for everything. That's the problem. He reached out, his hand hovering near her face before he caught himself and pulled back. Lena, if I let you do this, if I bring you into my organization, I become responsible for what it does to you, for how it changes you, for the person you'll have to become to survive in this world. That's not a responsibility I want. Then don't take responsibility. Treat me like any other employee. Give me assignments, evaluate my performance, fire me if I'm not valuable. She held his gaze. But don't reject my proposal because you're worried about protecting me. I'm not asking for protection. I'm asking for opportunity. You're asking for something you don't fully understand. So teach me. The words came out softer. You said you wanted to show me how this world really works. Here's your chance. Put me through whatever vetting process you use for new associates. Test my skills. See if I'm actually valuable or just delusional. If I fail, I go home with no hard feelings. If I succeed, you get an asset who brings capabilities your current team doesn't have. Marcus closed his eyes briefly, and when he opened them again, Lena saw resignation mixed with something darker. You have no idea what you're asking me to do. Then explain it to me. He moved away, putting the length of the room between them before speaking again. If I agree to this, and I'm not saying I am, you go through the same evaluation process every new associate goes through. Psychological screening, background investigation, practical assessments in controlled scenarios. And if at any point you demonstrate that you're not suited for this work, you walk away. No arguments, no second chances. Agreed. You don't tell anyone outside this organization what you do. Not your roommate, not your family, not your closest friends. You build a cover story, and you maintain it flawlessly. His voice hardened. You understand that everything you see, everything you learn, makes you complicit. If this organization ever faces legal consequences, you face them too. I understand. And you accept that I will put you in situations designed to break you, not because I want to hurt you, but because I need to know your limits before those limits get tested in the field. He turned back to face her. I will push you harder than anyone has ever pushed you. I will show you things that will haunt you. And if you can't handle it, you leave. Those are the terms. Lena's mouth went dry, but she forced herself to nod. What happens if I pass all your tests? Then you become part of something you can never fully leave. Marcus's expression was absolutely serious. There's no resignation letter in this business, Lena. No retirement party. You're in until I say you're out, and that only happens if you've proven yourself trustworthy beyond question. Otherwise, you're a liability that has to be managed. The implications were clear. Lena took a slow breath, weighing everything he'd said against the certainty she felt about this choice. When do we start? Marcus studied her for what felt like an eternity. Then he pulled his phone from his pocket and sent a brief text. Within a minute, Sophia appeared in the library doorway. Boss? Her tone was carefully neutral. Clear my schedule for tomorrow morning. We're running a full evaluation on Miss Harper. Marcus didn't look at Lena as he spoke. Standard protocol for new behavioral specialists. I want psychological screening completed by noon, background deep dive by end of day, practical assessment scenarios prepared for the following week. Sophia's eyebrows rose slightly. You're bringing her in? I'm evaluating whether she's viable. There's a difference. Now he did look at Lena, and his expression carried both warning and something that might have been hope. If she fails any component, she goes home. No exceptions. Understood. Sophia pulled out her own phone, already typing. I'll coordinate with the testing team. Anything specific you want flagged? Stress response patterns, moral flexibility under pressure, capacity for compartmentalization. Marcus ticked off each item like he was ordering supplies. And run a deep background. I want to know if there's anything in her past that creates vulnerabilities we haven't identified. On it. Sophia glanced at Lena with something that might have been sympathy. Get some sleep tonight. Tomorrow's going to be intense. She left, and suddenly the library felt much smaller. Lena and Marcus stood on opposite sides of the room, the weight of what had just been set in motion pressing down on both of them. "You can still change your mind," Marcus said quietly. "Right now, before this starts. I'll send you home tomorrow with a severance package and a recommendation letter that will open any door you want. No hard feelings, no consequences." "I'm not changing my mind." "Then I hope you're as strong as you think you are." He moved toward the door, pausing at the threshold. "Because if you're not, what happens next is going to destroy you." He left her alone with the city lights and the crushing realization of what she'd just committed to. Lena didn't sleep well that night. She lay in the expensive guest bed staring at the ceiling, running through scenarios of what Marcus's evaluation might involve. Psychological screening suggested tests designed to probe her mental stability, her capacity for moral compromise, her breaking points. Background investigation meant they'd dig into every aspect of her life, looking for weaknesses, secrets, anything that could be used against her or make her a liability. Practical assessments could mean anything. She thought about calling her roommate, hearing a friendly voice from her old life one more time, but it was past midnight, and besides, what would she say? "Hey, just wanted to let you know I'm about to undergo psychological evaluation to join a criminal organization. How's your week going?" Instead, she opened her laptop and reviewed the proposal one more time, looking for anything she'd missed. The arguments were sound. Her skills were genuine. The opportunity was real. So why did she feel like she was standing at the edge of a cliff, about to jump without knowing how far down the bottom was? Because Marcus had been right about one thing. She didn't fully understand what she was asking for. She understood the concept intellectually, but the reality of choosing to become part of his world, of accepting complicity in everything he did, hadn't fully landed yet. It would, though. Tomorrow, when the testing started. When they began probing her psyche for weaknesses and her past for vulnerabilities. When she had to prove she was more than just an academic with good observational skills. Lena finally dozed off around 4 in the morning, her dreams filled with fragmented images of restaurants and security teams, and Marcus's dark eyes watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Sophia woke her at 7 with coffee and a breakfast that looked designed for optimal cognitive performance. "Eat everything," she instructed. "The psychological screening is thorough and you'll need your energy." "What exactly does it involve?" "Standard personality assessments, modified for our specific needs. Then scenario-based evaluations where we measure your responses to ethical dilemmas. After that, a practical observation period where you'll sit in on a meeting and provide real-time analysis." Sophia's expression was unreadable. Most people fail at the ethical dilemmas. They can't reconcile their moral framework with the realities of what we do. "What happens if I fail?" "Marcus sends you home like he promised. You sign an NDA, accept a generous severance, and never speak about any of this again." She paused. "He's very good at making people disappear back into their normal lives. You wouldn't be the first candidate who didn't make it through evaluation." Lena absorbed this while mechanically eating eggs and toast that tasted like cardboard despite probably being chef-prepared. "How many people typically pass?" "About 1 in 10. And that's after initial screening eliminates most candidates before they ever get to this stage." Sophia's tone softened slightly. "Look, I know Marcus gave you the hard sell last night, tried to scare you off. But I'm going to be honest with you. If you're not absolutely certain about this, back out now. This evaluation isn't just testing your skills, it's testing whether you can live with the person you'll have to become to work here." "Did you pass?" "Barely. I almost quit during the ethical scenarios. Marcus pushed me to a point where I thought I couldn't continue." She met Lena's eyes directly. "But I also discovered something about myself during that process. I discovered I was willing to make harder choices than I'd thought possible if the context justified them. Question is whether you'll discover the same thing or discover you're not built for this world." Before Lena could respond, Sophia's phone buzzed. She checked it and stood. "Testing team's ready. Finish your coffee and meet me in the office down the hall in 10 minutes." The next 6 hours were the most psychologically exhausting of Lena's life. The evaluation started with standard personality assessments, questions designed to map her cognitive patterns, stress responses, and moral reasoning. She'd taken similar tests during her graduate studies, But these versions were modified with scenarios specific to Marcus's world. Questions about loyalty versus legality, acceptable collateral damage, when violence was justified. Lena answered honestly, knowing they'd detect lies. The testing team, 2 psychologists she'd never seen before, remained completely neutral, giving no indication whether her responses were acceptable or disqualifying. Then came the ethical dilemmas. Sophia had been right. These were designed to find her breaking point. Each scenario presented impossible choices with no clear moral answer, forcing her to articulate what principles she'd sacrifice and under what circumstances. The worst one involved a variation of the trolley problem, but instead of anonymous people on tracks, the scenario used specific individuals with detailed backstories. A loyal employee who'd become a liability versus the safety of the organization. A civilian witness versus operational security. A child's future versus immediate strategic advantage. Lena worked through each one methodically, applying the same analytical framework she used in her academic research. She explained her reasoning, acknowledged the moral costs, and made choices. Some of the choices made her sick. All of them required accepting that perfect morality was a luxury Marcus's world didn't afford. When the ethical scenarios finally ended, one of the psychologists, a woman named Dr. Chen, who'd barely spoken throughout the process, looked at her with something that might have been respect. "You're consistent," Dr. Chen observed. "Most candidates shift their moral framework based on how uncomfortable the scenario makes them. You've maintained the same ethical hierarchy throughout. Loyalty first, operational security second, minimal harm third. That's either very principled or very dangerous." "Can it be both?" Lena asked. "Usually is." Dr. Chen made notes on her tablet. "We're done with the formal testing. You'll get results after the background investigation completes and the practical assessment is evaluated. Until then, try to relax." Relaxing proved impossible. Lena returned to the guest room and tried to work on final revisions to her thesis, but she couldn't focus. Her mind kept returning to the scenarios, questioning her choices, wondering if she'd just demonstrated fitness for Marcus's world or revealed herself as someone who could rationalize anything. Around 3 in the afternoon, Sophia knocked and entered without waiting for response. Background came back clean. No vulnerabilities, no concerning associations, nothing that creates operational risk. She paused. "Marcus wants to see you. His office now." Lena's stomach dropped. What did the psychological screening show? Ask him yourself. Marcus's office was everything she'd expected. Massive desk, floor-to-ceiling windows, furnishings that probably cost more than most cars. But what caught her attention was the wall of monitors showing various security feeds from around the building, and she realized from multiple other locations around Chicago. He stood at the windows with his back to her, hands in his pockets, posture tense. "Close the door." Lena did, then waited. "Dr. Chen says you're either very principled or very dangerous." Marcus turned to face her. "I'm not sure which assessment concerns me more." "Did I pass?" "You passed the psychological screening and background investigation. Your ethical framework is consistent with what we need. You can make hard choices without falling apart, and you prioritize loyalty over conventional morality." He moved to his desk, pulling up something on his computer. "What concerns me is that you made those choices too easily. You didn't hesitate. You didn't second-guess yourself. You approached impossible dilemmas like they were academic exercises. Because that's what they were. Hypotheticals designed to test my reasoning. They were previews of real decisions you'll face if you work for me." Marcus's voice hardened. "The difference is that when those decisions are real, you'll see the consequences. You'll know the people affected. You'll carry the weight of every choice forever." Lena moved closer to the desk. "Are you trying to talk me out of this again?" "I'm trying to make sure you understand what you passed those tests to become." He pulled up a file on his screen, turning it so she could see. "Your practical assessment starts tomorrow. You'll observe a negotiation between me and a supplier who's been under-delivering on commitments. Your job is to read everyone in the room, identify who's lying, who's scared, who's planning something. You'll provide real-time analysis, and I'll act on that analysis. If you're wrong, people could get hurt. If you're right, you prove you're valuable." The reality of it hit her like cold water. This wasn't hypothetical anymore. These would be real people in a real situation where her observations would have real consequences. What if I fail? Her voice came out smaller than she intended. Then you go home and I find another way to handle the situation. Marcus studied her face. But Lena, if you succeed, if you prove you can do this work, there's no going back. You'll have demonstrated capability, which means I'll use that capability. You'll be part of my organization in ways that make you permanently complicit. Do you understand? She did. This was the actual cliff edge, the real point of no return. Everything before had been preparation. Tomorrow would be her choice made manifest. I understand, Lena said. What time tomorrow? Marcus's expression shifted through several emotions before settling on resignation. 10 a.m. Sophia will brief you on the specifics tonight. Get some rest. And Lena, if you're going to change your mind, do it before tomorrow, because after that negotiation, you're either in or you're a liability I have to manage. There's no middle ground. He dismissed her with a nod, returning his attention to the monitors. Lena left his office feeling like she'd just signed a contract written in invisible ink, with terms she'd only discover after it was too late to renegotiate. That evening, Sophia provided the briefing Marcus had promised. The supplier, a man named Vincent Torino, who ran shipping operations through the Port of Chicago, had been shorting shipments for the past 3 months, small amounts, easily missed in bulk inventory, but adding up to significant losses. Marcus suspected Vincent was either skimming product to sell independently or had been compromised by a competitor. Your job is to watch Vincent and his associates during the meeting, Sophia explained. Tell Marcus what you observe. Is Vincent lying about the shortages? Is someone in his crew working against him? Is this incompetence or betrayal? She fixed Lena with a serious look. Whatever you say, Marcus will act on it. So be certain before you speak. Lena spent the rest of the evening reviewing everything she knew about detecting deception through behavioral cues. Microexpressions, inconsistent body language, stress indicators. She'd studied it all academically, but tomorrow would test whether that knowledge translated to high-stakes reality. She barely slept again, her mind running through scenarios and second-guessing her decision to pursue this. But when morning came and Sophia knocked on her door with instructions to dress professionally, Lena found herself moving forward on autopilot. The meeting was held in a conference room on a lower floor of the building, neutral territory, Sophia explained, where both parties could feel relatively secure. Marcus arrived early with 2 members of his security team, positioning himself at the head of the table with absolute authority. Lena sat to his right, notebook and pen in front of her, even though she knew she'd be too focused on observation to write anything down. Her heart hammered so hard she was certain everyone could hear it. Vincent Torino arrived exactly on time with 3 associates. He was mid-50s, powerfully built, with the kind of face that suggested he'd seen hard years and survived them. His associates ranged from nervous to cocky, and Lena immediately started cataloging their baseline behaviors. Vincent. Marcus greeted him with professional courtesy. Thank you for coming. Marcus. Vincent took the seat across from him, his associates flanking him. I understand there are concerns about our recent deliveries. Concerns is a diplomatic word. Marcus opened a folder in front of him. Over the past 3 months, shipments from your operation have been consistently short. Small percentages, but they add up. I'd like to understand why. Vincent's face remained calm, but Lena caught the micro-expression that flashed across it. Fear, quickly masked. Inventory discrepancies happen. We've been investigating on our end. Have you? Marcus's tone suggested he didn't believe that for a second. And what have you discovered? Possible accounting errors. My team is reviewing all the numbers. Vincent glanced at the associate on his left, a younger man who immediately looked away. We'll have a full report next week. Lena watched the exchange carefully. Vincent was lying, but not about everything. His concern about the discrepancies seemed genuine. The younger associate on his left, though, his stress responses were off the charts. Elevated heart rate visible in his carotid pulse, micro-expressions suggesting guilt, and he'd positioned himself at the table in a way that suggested he wanted to be as far from Vincent as possible. She leaned slightly toward Marcus and whispered, Left associate, high stress, guilty body language. He knows something. Marcus barely acknowledged her input, but his next question targeted exactly where she'd pointed him. Your associate there, that's Marco, isn't it? How long has he been managing your shipping manifests? Vincent's eyes narrowed. 6 months. He's been reliable. Has he? Marcus shifted his attention to Marco, who looked like he wanted to dissolve into the floor. Marco, you handle the documentation for every shipment that comes through Vincent's operation? Marco swallowed hard. Yes, sir. And you've noticed these discrepancies? We're still investigating. His voice shook slightly. Lena watched Marco's hands. They were trembling. Classic stress response, but more than that, there was something in his posture that suggested he was preparing to either run or confess. She leaned toward Marcus again. He's ready to break. Push him. Marcus stood slowly, moving around the table with deliberate, predatory calm. Marco, I'm going to ask you a very simple question, and I want you to think carefully about your answer. Have you been altering the shipping manifests? The room went absolutely silent. Vincent stared at Marco with an expression that promised violence. Marco's face went white. He started, then stopped. The truth, Marco. Marcus's voice was almost kind. Right now. Because if I have to dig it out of you, the consequences will be significantly worse. Marco broke. It wasn't supposed to be this much. They said just small amounts, nothing that would be noticed. They said it was just evening out some debts. They who? Vincent's voice was dangerous. Castellano's people. They approached me 3 months ago, said they knew about my gambling problem, said they could make it go away if I adjusted some numbers. Marco was talking faster now, words spilling out in a rush. I didn't want to, Vincent, I swear, but they threatened my family. I didn't know what else to do. Lena watched the revelation land. Vincent's expression shifted from anger to calculation. He was already thinking about how this exposed him to Castellano's organization, about what it meant for his position. The other 2 associates looked shocked, but not surprised, suggesting they'd suspected something was wrong but hadn't known what. Marcus returned to his seat with the same deliberate calm. Vincent, you've been compromised. One of Castellano's assets has been operating inside your organization for 3 months, stealing from both of us. I'll handle Marco. Vincent's voice promised terrible things. You'll do nothing to Marco until we've extracted every piece of information he has about Castellano's operation. Marcus's tone left no room for argument. Then you'll replace him with someone who's been properly vetted, and you'll compensate me for the losses his theft caused. That's non-negotiable. Marcus leaned forward slightly. You allowed a vulnerability in your organization that cost me money and could have cost me more. You fix it, or I find a new shipping partner. Your choice. Vincent's jaw clenched, but he nodded. Understood. Good. Marco stays with my people for debriefing. You have 72 hours to propose a compensation plan I'll accept. Marcus stood, effectively ending the meeting. Gentlemen? Vincent and his remaining associates left. Marco stayed, looking like he might vomit. 2 of Marcus's security team moved to flank him, not threatening but clearly in control. Marcus turned to Lena once they were alone. Your assessment? Marco was the weak point. His stress responses were obvious once you knew what to look for. Vincent was genuinely surprised, which means he either didn't know about the compromise or he's an exceptional liar. Lena kept her voice steady despite the adrenaline still flooding her system. The other 2 associates weren't involved, but they weren't completely shocked either. They probably suspected something was wrong, but didn't want to be the ones to investigate. Exactly right. Marcus gestured to one of his security team. Take Marco to the secure room. Get everything he knows about Castellano's operation, contacts, methods, anything he can give us. Then we'll decide what to do with him. Marco was led away, and suddenly Lena was alone with Marcus in the conference room. The reality of what had just happened crashed over her. She'd identified a liar in a real negotiation. Her analysis had led directly to someone being detained for interrogation. The academic exercise had become visceral reality. How do you feel? Marcus asked quietly. Like I just did something I can't undo. You did. He moved closer, his expression serious. Marco will give us intelligence about Castellano's operation. That intelligence will be used to make decisions that affect people's lives. You're part of that chain now. Lena met his eyes. I know. And you're okay with that? She thought about lying, about pretending the weight of it didn't affect her, but Marcus would see through that, and besides, he'd asked for honesty. I'm not okay with it, but I'm willing to carry it. There's a difference. Something shifted in Marcus's expression. Respect, maybe, or recognition. Welcome to my world, Lena. You just passed your practical assessment. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implications Lena was still processing. She'd passed. She was in. Everything that came next would be a direct result of the choice she'd made when she handed Marcus that proposal, when she'd refused to back down, when she'd proven she could identify Marco's guilt and live with the consequences. Marcus was watching her with that same careful attention he always gave important moments, reading her reactions, cataloging her responses. You're still standing, he observed. Most people need to sit down after their first real operation. I'm not most people. Lena's voice came out steadier than she felt. What happens to Marco now? That depends on what he tells us during debriefing. If he cooperates fully and the intelligence is valuable, he gets relocated somewhere Castellano can't find him. New identity, financial support to start over, protection for his family. Marcus moved toward the door, expecting her to follow. If he holds back or lies, the options become significantly less pleasant. You'd kill him. I'd make a decision based on risk versus value. He held the door open for her. Marco betrayed Vincent because Castellano exploited his vulnerabilities. That makes him a victim of circumstance, but also proves he's exploitable. Whether he lives or dies depends on whether he can be trusted after this, and trust requires complete honesty. They walked through the hallway back toward the elevator. Lena's mind raced through the implications. She'd helped identify Marco. She'd pointed Marcus toward him. Whatever happened next, she owned a piece of it. How do you live with it? The question escaped before she could stop it. Making those decisions. Knowing that someone's life depends on calculations about strategic value. Marcus waited until they were in the elevator, doors closed and privacy assured before answering. I remind myself that everyone in this world made choices that brought them here. Marco chose to gamble beyond his means. He chose to accept Castellano's offer instead of coming to Vincent for help. Those choices have consequences. He paused. That doesn't mean I enjoy deciding his fate. It means I accept that someone has to make that decision, and I'd rather it be me than someone with less consideration for context. The elevator rose smoothly toward the penthouse. Lena watched the floor numbers climb, processing everything that had changed in the past hour. This morning, she'd been a candidate under evaluation. Now she was part of Marcus's organization, complicit in interrogations and strategic decisions, and all the violence that existed at the edges of what she'd witnessed. What's my official role? She asked. What do I tell people I do? You're a consultant for my hospitality investments. Behavioral analysis for customer service optimization and employee satisfaction. Marcus's answer came immediately, suggesting he'd already thought this through. It's vague enough to be believable and specific enough to sound legitimate. You'll have an office in one of my downtown properties, actual consulting work to justify the cover, and assignments that serve both purposes. So I'll actually be improving customer service? When it serves operational needs, yes. When I need your real skills, you'll be reading people during negotiations, vetting potential associates, identifying threats before they materialize. He looked at her directly. The legitimate work provides cover. The real work is what you were hired for. They reached the penthouse and Marcus led her to his office. The monitors still displayed security feeds from multiple locations. He pulled up a file on his computer and turned the screen toward her. Your first official assignment. We have a new supplier meeting next week, importing operation out of Los Angeles. They've approached us about distribution rights in the Midwest, but I don't know enough about their organization to commit. He indicated several photographs of men in business attire. These are the principals who will be attending. I need you to research their backgrounds, identify potential vulnerabilities or reliability issues, and sit in on the meeting to provide real-time assessment. Lena studied the photographs, her analytical mind already working. You want to know if they can be trusted. I want to know everything, if they're stable, if they have financial pressures that make them exploitable, If anyone in their organization is a weak point like Marco was for Vincent. Marcus leaned back in his chair. You have 5 days to build psychological profiles and prepare for the meeting. Sophia will provide access to our research databases and intelligence resources. What if I find something disqualifying? Then we decline their offer and I find different suppliers. Your job isn't to make decisions, it's to give me the information I need to make better ones. His expression softened slightly. Lena, you're valuable because you see patterns other people miss. Use that skill. Trust your analysis. I'll handle the strategic implications. She nodded slowly, feeling the weight of real responsibility settling on her shoulders. This wasn't a test anymore. This was actual work with actual consequences. I'll need access to my apartment, Lena said. Clothes, personal items, my research materials. I can't live out of a guest room indefinitely. Already arranged, Sophia's team retrieved everything you might need. It's being delivered this afternoon. As for your apartment, we've maintained your lease and arranged for your roommate to think you're staying with family during a difficult time. Marcus's efficiency was almost unsettling. Your cover story is solid. Your academic life continues on schedule. You defend your thesis in 3 weeks, and I expect you to pass with distinction. You expect me to write a dissertation and work for you simultaneously? I expect you to manage both because you're capable of it. His tone suggested this wasn't negotiable. Your academic credentials are part of what makes you valuable. Dr. Lena Harper, behavioral psychologist, sounds significantly more legitimate than Lena Harper, college dropout working for a criminal organization. The logic was sound, even if the execution would be exhausting. What about my friends, my family? They're going to want to see me eventually. You maintain contact carefully. Your family believes you're dealing with a personal crisis that requires space. They'll respect that boundary for now. Your friends can see you, but you control the when and where. Nothing that compromises operational security. Marcus stood, moving to the window. This is the reality of the life you chose. Compartmentalization, careful lies, distance from people who can't know the truth. Lena joined him at the window, looking out over Chicago. The city sprawled below them. Millions of people living normal lives, completely unaware of the hidden systems that operated beneath the surface. A week ago, she'd been one of them. Now she was standing in a penthouse planning how to lie to everyone she cared about. Do you ever regret it? She asked quietly. Building something that requires this much deception? Marcus was silent for a long moment. Every day. But I regret the alternatives more. Before she could ask what he meant, his phone buzzed. He checked it, and his expression hardened. Marco's talking. Castellano's operation is bigger than we thought. They've been systematically compromising suppliers across multiple organizations, not just mine. This was coordinated. How many suppliers? At least 6 that Marco knows about. Could be more. Marcus typed rapidly, sending messages. This changes things. What I thought was an isolated incident is actually a strategic operation to destabilize my supply chain. Lena watched him shift into tactical mode, his entire demeanor changing. This was Marcus at work, focused, calculating, dangerous. What will you do? Verify Marco's information. Identify which other suppliers have been compromised. Then I make Castellano understand that attacking my infrastructure has consequences he won't enjoy. He looked at her. This is about to get complicated. Are you ready for that? I don't know if I have a choice. You always have a choice. You can walk away right now, go back to your normal life with a severance package and an NDA. His voice softened. Or you can stay and be part of what comes next, but understand that what comes next will be harder than what you've seen so far. Lena thought about Marco, terrified and confessing, about Vincent's compromised organization, about Castellano's systematic operation to undermine Marcus's business. The academic part of her brain was fascinated by the strategic complexity. The human part was terrified of what being involved would cost. I'm staying, she heard herself say. But I need you to be honest with me. What exactly is coming next? Marcus turned to face her fully. War. Not the dramatic kind with shootouts and car chases. The kind that happens in conference rooms and through financial systems, and by carefully dismantling an opponent's infrastructure piece by piece until they have nothing left. He paused. Castellano made a move against me. I have to respond in a way that ensures no one else thinks they can do the same. That response will involve decisions about people's lives, including people who are only peripherally involved. Like Marco. Like Marco. Like Vincent. Like everyone in Castellano's organization who participated in this operation. His expression was absolutely serious. Some of them will negotiate their way to safety. Some won't. Your job is to help me identify which is which by reading them accurately. Can you do that? The weight of it pressed down on her. This was the reality she'd signed up for, stripped of any romantic notions about criminal enterprises. This was people making calculated decisions about other people's futures based on strategic value. I can do it, Lena said, forcing conviction into her voice. But I need time to process what that means. Take the rest of the day. Tomorrow we start preparing for the supplier meeting, and you'll need to be focused. Marcus returned his attention to his phone. Sophia will brief you on the research protocols and database access. If you need anything, ask her. It was a dismissal, professional and clean. Lena left his office feeling like she'd just signed a contract she was still learning to read. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of orientation. Sophia walked her through the intelligence databases Marcus's organization maintained, comprehensive files on associates, competitors, suppliers, law enforcement personnel. The depth of information was staggering. They had financial records, personal histories, psychological assessments, surveillance photographs, everything needed to understand and, when necessary, manipulate the people in Marcus's world. This is surveillance on a scale I didn't think was possible, Lena said, scrolling through a file that detailed someone's coffee shop preferences and daily routines. Information is power in this business. The more we know about people, the better we can predict their behavior. Sophia pulled up another database. This is the threat assessment system. Every person who interacts with our organization gets evaluated and assigned a risk level. Your job will be updating these assessments based on behavioral observations. How many people are in the system? Currently, just over 3,000. That includes employees, associates, suppliers, known competitors, and persons of interest. Sophia's tone suggested this was routine. You'll focus on the high-value contacts initially, people Marcus deals with directly. As you develop expertise, you'll take on broader assessment responsibilities. Lena's mind reeled. 3,000 people, all cataloged and evaluated like specimens in a research study. This is my thesis made real. Threat assessment in social networks, behavioral pattern analysis, predictive modeling of violence risk. That's why Marcus hired you. You already understand the theory. Now you learn the practice. Sophia closed the databases. One more thing. Your cover office is being set up downtown. You'll start spending time there next week to establish your consultant identity. Actual work, actual clients, all completely legitimate. Clients you've arranged. Clients who need the services you're selling and who happen to be connected to our interests in ways that make them ideal for information gathering. Sophia smiled slightly. Nothing in this organization is single-purpose, Lena. Everything serves multiple functions. Get used to it. That evening, Lena sat in the library with her laptop, trying to focus on final thesis revisions, but instead finding herself cataloging everything she'd learned. The databases, the cover identity, the upcoming assignment with the Los Angeles suppliers. Her normal life, classes, research, academic concerns, felt like it belonged to someone else. Her phone buzzed with a text from her roommate. Missing you. When can we actually talk? Phone calls would be nice instead of just texts. Guilt twisted in Lena's stomach. She typed back carefully. Soon. Still dealing with family stuff. I'll call when I can. Promise. The lie came easier than it should have. That's what scared her most. Not the criminal enterprise she'd joined, but how quickly she was learning to deceive the people who cared about her. A knock interrupted her thoughts. Marcus stood in the doorway, changed into casual clothes, looking more tired than she'd seen him. Can't sleep either? He asked. Too much to process. He moved into the library, selecting a book from the shelves with the familiarity of someone who actually read them. The first week is always the hardest. You're learning to live with the weight of what you've chosen. Does it get easier? You get stronger. That's not the same as easier. He settled into a chair across from her. What you're feeling right now, the guilt, the cognitive dissonance, the fear that you're becoming someone you don't recognize, that's normal. Everyone who joins this organization goes through it. Even you? Especially me. I built this empire from nothing, which means I made every hard choice personally before I had people to delegate them to. His voice carried old pain. The difference is, I didn't have anyone to tell me it was normal to feel destroyed by those choices. I thought the guilt meant I was weak. It took me years to understand that feeling the weight of your decisions is what keeps you human. Lena studied him in the dim library light. You're trying to make me feel better about lying to my roommate. I'm trying to help you understand that you can do difficult things and still be a good person. The two aren't mutually exclusive. He set the book aside. Lena, what you did today, identifying Marco, accepting responsibility for your role in his interrogation, agreeing to continue despite knowing what comes next, that took courage. Give yourself credit for that. Courage or stupidity? In my experience, they're often the same thing. A slight smile. The Los Angeles suppliers meeting is in 5 days. You'll have comprehensive files to review, behavioral baselines to establish, and practical scenarios to prepare for. It's a lot of work in a short time. I can handle it. I know you can. That's why you're here. Marcus stood, preparing to leave. One more thing. Your thesis defense is scheduled for 3 weeks from now. I expect you to be brilliant. Your academic success reflects on the legitimacy of your cover, and beyond that, you worked too hard to not finish what you started. The casual expectation that she'd excel at both lives simultaneously should have been infuriating. Instead, Lena found it oddly comforting. Marcus believed she could manage both worlds. Maybe she could. Thank you, she said quietly, for the honesty, about the guilt and the choices and all of it. You're part of my organization now. That makes you my responsibility. His expression was serious. I'll push you hard, Lena. I'll ask you to do things that scare you, but I won't lie to you about what any of it costs. You deserve that much. He left her alone with Chicago's lights and the weight of choices she was still learning to carry. The next 4 days were a crash course in intelligence analysis at a practical level Lena's academic training hadn't prepared her for. She studied the Los Angeles suppliers until she could recite their biographical details from memory. The principal organizer was a man named David Chen, second-generation Chinese-American, legitimate import business masking less legitimate operations. His partners included his cousin Michael, a logistics specialist, and a woman named Sarah Vega, who handled financial operations. On paper, they looked stable. Successful legitimate businesses, clean financial records, no obvious vulnerabilities. But Lena dug deeper, looking for the patterns her training had taught her to recognize. David Chen had divorced 2 years ago. The settlement had been expensive, and while his business showed healthy profits, his personal spending suggested someone maintaining appearances rather than actual wealth. Michael Chen had a brother who'd been arrested for drug trafficking 3 years prior, charges that had mysteriously disappeared. Sarah Vega was the most interesting. Her background was almost too clean, suggesting someone who'd carefully constructed a professional identity to obscure a more complicated past. Lena compiled her findings into a report that Marcus read in silence, his expression revealing nothing. When he finished, he looked up at her with something that might have been impressed. You found Michael's brother. My intelligence team missed that connection. They were looking at official records. I looked at social media and family photographs. The brother appears in family photos up until his arrest, then disappears completely. Classic pattern of someone being deliberately hidden. Lena pulled up the relevant images on her laptop, and Sarah's background being two perfect raised flags. No one has zero social media presence and a completely linear professional history unless they're actively managing their image. What's your assessment going into the meeting? David is financially stressed but hiding it. Michael has family complications that could create vulnerabilities. Sarah is competent but potentially hiding something significant about her past. Lena met his eyes. Separately, these aren't disqualifying. Together, they suggest an organization with more instability than they want you to see. Do we take the meeting? We take the meeting and watch carefully. If they're stable enough to be valuable partners, the vulnerabilities can be managed. If they're not, We walk away before committing resources. She paused. But I'd recommend having contingency plans in place. Something about this feels too convenient. But Marcus smiled, genuine pleasure at her analysis. You're learning. Sophia said you'd pick this up quickly, but I didn't expect this level of insight this fast. I've spent 6 years studying human behavior. This is just applied research. Lena closed her laptop. What happens at the meeting? You observe. David and his partners will make their pitch for distribution rights. You read them, watch for inconsistencies, identify any deception. If you see something concerning, you signal me. He demonstrated a subtle gesture, fingers tapping twice on the table. I'll adjust my negotiating strategy accordingly. What if I'm wrong? Then we learn from it and refine your approach for next time. Marcus's voice carried absolute confidence. Lena, I'm not expecting perfection. I'm expecting your best analysis based on available information. That's all anyone can provide. The meeting took place in a neutral conference room at a downtown hotel, public enough to feel safe, private enough for sensitive discussions. Lena arrived early with Marcus and Sophia, helping set up recording equipment disguised as normal business technology. They'll expect surveillance, Sophia explained, positioning a camera inside a decorative pen holder. Part of the game is making them think they know where all the cameras are while missing the ones that matter. David Chen and his partners arrived precisely on time. Lena watched them enter, cataloging first impressions. David moved with practiced confidence, but there was tension in his shoulders that suggested stress he was working to hide. Michael hung back slightly, deferential to his cousin, but alert in a way that spoke to security training. Sarah was coolly professional, her expressions controlled almost to the point of being unreadable. Marcus greeted them with perfect hospitality. David, thank you for making the trip. Please, sit. The negotiation began with pleasantries and background, David explaining their Los Angeles operation, the distribution networks they'd built, their interest in expanding to the Midwest. Everything sounded professional and well-reasoned, but Lena was watching faces, not listening to words. She saw David's micro-expressions when discussing financials. Brief flashes of concern quickly masked. She saw Michael's careful monitoring of his cousin, the way he positioned himself to see both the door and Marcus simultaneously. She saw Sarah's fingers tap a rhythm on the table whenever David mentioned specific numbers, as if she was calculating something in real time. Your proposal suggests you can handle distribution for significant volume, Marcus said. What's your current capacity? We move approximately 15,000 units monthly through our West Coast network, David answered smoothly. Expanding to the Midwest, we estimate capacity for 25,000 within 6 months. Sarah's fingers stopped tapping, just for a moment, but Lena caught it. That number wasn't accurate, or Sarah didn't believe it was achievable. Lena tapped twice on the table. Marcus shifted seamlessly. Those are impressive numbers. I'd like to see documentation of your current operations, shipping manifests, client lists, financial statements showing that level of activity. David's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Of course. We can provide that information through appropriate channels. I'd prefer to see it before committing to a partnership. Marcus leaned back slightly. Understand, David? I'm interested in your proposal, but I've recently discovered that some of my suppliers weren't as transparent about their capabilities as they should have been. I'm being more careful now. The atmosphere in the room shifted. David and Michael exchanged a glance that lasted just a fraction too long. Sarah's expression remained neutral, but her posture changed, straighter, more alert. What kind of transparency are you looking for? David asked carefully. Complete transparency. Financial records, operational details, background on everyone in your organization who'd have access to my products. Marcus's voice was pleasant, but absolutely firm. If we're going to work together, I need to know exactly who I'm working with. Lena watched the reaction carefully. Michael looked uncomfortable. David's calculated expression suggested he was weighing options. But Sarah looked almost relieved, as if Marcus had just confirmed something she'd suspected. The meeting continued for another hour, but the dynamic had changed. David's pitch became more defensive, less confident. Michael barely spoke. Sarah started asking pointed questions about Marcus's expectations and requirements that suggested she was the one actually running due diligence. When they finally left, promising to provide the requested documentation within a week, Marcus waited until they were completely gone before turning to Lena. What did you see? David's lying about capacity. The numbers he quoted don't match Sarah's reactions when he said them. Michael's more concerned about security than business, which suggests they've had problems they're not disclosing. And Sarah, Lena paused, organizing her thoughts. Sarah knows there are problems. She's trying to manage David's overselling, but she's not in a position to stop him directly. Recommendation? Don't do business with them. Not yet, anyway. They're not stable enough to handle the volume they're promising, and internal tensions will create reliability issues. Lena met his eyes. They need us more than we need them, which means they're desperate. Desperate people make mistakes. Marcus smiled, and it wasn't entirely pleasant. Exactly right. We decline their proposal and monitor whether anyone else takes it. If they find a partner, we watch how that relationship develops. If they can't find anyone, we know they're even more compromised than suspected. Sophia pulled up the meeting recordings on her laptop. I'll have full analysis ready by tomorrow. But Lena's initial read matches what the surveillance caught. David's baseline stress was elevated throughout. Sarah contradicted him non-verbally at least 4 times. Michael looked ready to bolt. Good work, Marcus said to Lena. Your analysis saved us from a partnership that would have cost significant resources to fix or terminate later. The compliment should have felt good. Instead, Lena felt the weight of what her observations meant. David Chen and his partners had made the trip hoping for a deal that would solve their financial problems. Her analysis had just ensured they'd go home empty-handed, possibly forcing them into more desperate measures. I just ended their opportunity, she said quietly. You identified that they weren't viable partners, Marcus corrected. David ended his own opportunity by overselling capabilities he doesn't have. That's not your responsibility. But it felt like responsibility anyway. This was the reality she'd chosen, making assessments that affected people's lives, living with the consequences of being right. That evening, Lena sat in her new office downtown, ostensibly reviewing materials for her legitimate consulting work, but actually processing everything from the meeting. The office was professional and well-appointed, giving her a base of operations separate from the penthouse. It felt like establishing a second identity, Dr. Lena Harper, consultant who had no connection to the woman who'd just helped Marcus avoid a bad business deal. Her phone rang. Her thesis advisor. Lena, I got your draft. This is exceptional work. Probably the strongest thesis I've supervised this year. Dr. Morrison sounded genuinely pleased. Are you feeling better? You mentioned a family emergency, but you haven't said much about it. Lena manufactured appropriate emotion. It's been difficult, but I'm managing. Thank you for the extension. It made all the difference. Of course. Listen, your defense is in 2 weeks. I know you've had a lot on your plate, but I need you to be prepared to present this work at your highest level. This research deserves a strong defense. I'll be ready. I promise. They talked for a few more minutes about defense logistics and committee composition. When she hung up, Lena stared at her phone, feeling the cognitive dissonance intensify. In 2 weeks, she'd stand in front of an academic committee and defend theoretical frameworks for threat assessment. Meanwhile, she'd be using those same frameworks to help Marcus make decisions about people's lives in very non-theoretical ways. She couldn't do both. Except she had to. Marcus found her still at her desk long after normal business hours. Sophia said you were still here? Everything okay? Just processing. My thesis defense is in 2 weeks, and I'm not sure how to reconcile the person who wrote that research with the person I'm becoming here. He sat across from her, his expression understanding. You don't reconcile them. You accept that you're both people simultaneously. The academic researcher and the intelligence analyst. They use the same skills toward different ends. But one is legitimate and one operates within conventional rules and one operates outside them, Marcus interrupted. That doesn't make either one more real or valid. It makes them different contexts for the same capabilities. Lena wanted to believe that. Wanted to think she could maintain both identities without one corrupting the other. What if I can't keep them separate? Then you make choices about which matters more to you. His voice was gentle. But Lena, you're 3 days into this work and already demonstrating exceptional value. You spotted patterns in David's organization my intelligence team missed. You read the room accurately enough to change my negotiating strategy in real time. That's rare talent. Talent for analyzing people who are probably going to suffer consequences because of my analysis. David and his partners will face consequences because of choices they made, overselling capabilities, taking on obligations they can't fulfill, operating in a business that doesn't forgive incompetence. Marcus leaned forward. Your job is to provide accurate information. Mine is to decide what to do with that information. Don't take on responsibility that isn't yours. But it felt like hers anyway. That was the cost she was learning to pay. The weight of being right, of seeing clearly, of using her skills in ways that affected real lives, instead of remaining safely theoretical. Go home, Marcus said, standing. Get some sleep. Tomorrow you can start reviewing the files on Castellano's operation. We need to identify everyone Marco implicated and assess whether they're negotiable or need to be handled differently. The casual mention of Castellano reminded Lena that the larger conflict was still unfolding. Marco's confession had exposed a systematic operation to compromise Marcus's suppliers. That exposure would require response, which would require the kind of strategic decisions she was now part of making. Will there be violence? She asked quietly. Marcus was silent for a moment. There will be consequences proportional to the threat Castellano represents. Some of those consequences may involve violence. Most will involve financial and operational pressure designed to dismantle his infrastructure without direct confrontation. And if direct confrontation becomes necessary, then I'll handle it personally, and you'll be insulated from that part of the operation. His voice was firm. Lena, your value is intelligence analysis, not enforcement. You'll see some hard things, but I won't put you in situations where violence is the primary objective. It was a line Marcus was drawing for her protection. Lena wasn't sure whether to be grateful or frustrated by his paternalism. What if I need to understand all of it, not just the analysis part? Why would you need that? Because understanding context makes me better at my job. If I don't know what consequences my assessments lead to, I can't calibrate my analysis properly. Marcus studied her with that careful attention she was learning to recognize. You want to see what happens after the analysis. The enforcement part. The consequences part. Yes. No. Flat refusal. You stay in the analytical role. That's non-negotiable. Why? You said you'd show me how this world works. And I am. But there are parts of this world I won't expose you to because they'll change you in ways you can't come back from. His expression hardened. I've seen what enforcement does to people. Even professionals who are trained for it carry scars. You're not built for that work, Lena. Your value is elsewhere. The dismissal stung, even though Lena knew he was right. She didn't want to be in the room when consequences became physical. She didn't want that weight, but not seeing it felt like willful blindness to what her analysis enabled. Then help me understand without seeing it directly, she said finally. Talk me through what happens. Show me the strategic thinking without the visceral details. I need context to do this job well. Marcus considered this carefully. I can do that. But understand, even knowing abstractly will affect you. There's no clean separation between analysis and consequences when you understand the chain of events your work initiates. I accept that. Then, tomorrow, after you review Castellano's files, we'll discuss what responses are being considered and why. You'll understand the strategic framework without being exposed to operational details you don't need. He moved toward the door. But for tonight, go back to the penthouse and rest. You've had enough weight to carry for one day. He was right. Lena gathered her things and left the office, driving through Chicago's night streets toward the luxury prison she was learning to call home. The city looked different now, not safer or more dangerous, just clearer. She saw the systems beneath the surface, understood the negotiations and consequences that shaped outcomes most people never noticed. Her phone buzzed with another text from her roommate. Seriously, I'm worried. Can we please talk? Actual conversation, not just texts? Lena stared at the message, guilt and necessity warring inside her. She couldn't keep avoiding real contact, but she also couldn't explain what she was actually doing without destroying carefully constructed cover stories. She called. Her roommate answered on the first ring. Finally, are you okay? What's going on? I'm okay, Lena assured her, manufacturing believable emotion. Family stuff has been intense, but I'm managing. I'm sorry I've been so distant. They talked for 20 minutes. carefully edited conversation where Lena gave just enough detail to satisfy concern without revealing anything real. She described staying with family, dealing with difficult situations, needing space to process complicated emotions. All technically true if you stretch the definitions far enough. When she finally hung up, Lena felt hollowed out. The lies came easier each time, which terrified her more than anything else she'd encountered in Marcus's world. She could handle intelligence analysis, strategic assessment, even the abstract knowledge of consequences. But losing herself in constructed identities felt like drowning in slow motion. The penthouse was quiet when she arrived. Lena went straight to her room, changed into comfortable clothes, and stood at the window watching Chicago exist below her. Somewhere out there, David Chen and his partners were regrouping after a failed pitch. Marco was giving intelligence that would reshape Marcus's conflict with Castellano. Vincent was rebuilding his compromised organization, all of it connected by invisible threads of cause and effect, decision and consequence, analysis and action. And now she was part of it. For better or worse, learning to carry weight she'd never expected when she'd warned a stranger about an assassination attempt in a restaurant that felt like it belonged to another lifetime. The breaking point came 3 days before Lena's thesis defense, when Marcus's sister was taken. Lena had spent the morning reviewing Castellano's organizational structure, mapping relationships and vulnerabilities, preparing recommendations for how Marcus should respond to the systematic compromise of his supply chain. The work was methodical, analytical, exactly what she'd been hired to do. She'd just identified a potential weak point in Castellano's security team when Sophia burst into her office without knocking. "We have a situation." Sophia's face was pale in a way Lena had never seen. Elena Vale was abducted 40 minutes ago. 3 vehicles, professional extraction, witnesses suppressed. Castellano's people left a phone with instructions. The world tilted. Marcus had mentioned his sister exactly once, a pediatric surgeon at Northwestern, brilliant and completely separate from his business. The one person in his life who remained untouched by the empire he'd built. "Where's Marcus?" "Conference room. He's..." Sophia's voice cracked slightly. "He's not good. We need everyone focused. That includes you." Lena followed Sophia through the building at a near run. The conference room was full of Marcus's security team, all speaking in tense, clipped tones. Maps of Chicago covered the walls. Surveillance feeds played on multiple screens. And in the center of it all, Marcus stood absolutely still, staring at a phone on the table with an expression that suggested he was barely holding himself together. "Talk to me," he said, his voice frighteningly calm. "What do we know?" The older security officer Lena recognized from her first night, his name was James, stepped forward. Elena left the hospital at 7:15 a.m., standard route to her apartment. 3 vehicles boxed her in at the intersection of Michigan and Superior. 4 operators, coordinated extraction, less than 90 seconds start to finish. They left the phone with a voice message. Marcus picked up the phone and played it on speaker. A digitally altered voice filled the room. "Mr. Vale, you've been disrupting my operations, compromising my assets, making things very difficult for my business. Your sister is safe for now. Whether she stays that way depends on your willingness to negotiate. You have 24 hours to contact this number and discuss terms. After that, I stop being reasonable." The message ended. Marcus set the phone down with hands that barely shook, but Lena could see the rage beneath his controlled exterior. This wasn't the calculated businessman she'd come to know. This was someone on the edge of violence that would be absolute and uncontrolled. "Castellano made a mistake," Marcus said quietly. "Elena has nothing to do with my business. She's a civilian, completely off limits by every code that governs what we do." "He's desperate," James observed. "Marco's intelligence exposed 6 compromised suppliers. The financial pressure is forcing him into moves he wouldn't normally make." "I don't care about his desperation." Marcus's voice dropped to something dangerous. "I care about getting my sister back alive and making absolutely certain Castellano understands what happens when you violate the only line I've drawn." Lena watched the dynamic in the room shift. These were professionals who'd worked with Marcus for years, but even they looked uncertain about what came next. Taking a civilian, especially family, wasn't just against informal rules. It was the kind of move that justified responses that would normally be considered disproportionate. "What's the play?" Sophia asked quietly. Marcus was silent for a long moment, visibly fighting for control. When he spoke again, his voice was steadier. We tracked the phone they left. We analyzed the abduction for any details about where they might take her. We identify every property Castellano controls or has access to. And we prepare to extract Elena by force if negotiation fails. And if negotiation succeeds, James's tone suggested he didn't think it would. Then Castellano gets what he wants, me backing off his operations, until Elena is safe. After that, everything changes. Marcus looked around the room. I need everyone focused. This is personal, but we handle it professionally. Understood? Agreement rippled through the security team. They dispersed to their assignments, leaving Marcus alone with Sophia and Lena. I need you on this, Marcus said to Lena without preamble. When I talk to Castellano, I need you reading him, looking for tells about where Elena is, what condition she's in, whether he's actually willing to negotiate or just buying time. I've never analyzed someone in a hostage situation. You've analyzed people under stress in negotiations. This is the same skill set applied to higher stakes. His eyes locked on hers. Lena, I wouldn't ask if I had another option, but you see things other people miss, and I need every advantage I can get. The weight of it crashed over her. This wasn't abstract analysis anymore. This was Marcus's sister, a woman who saved children's lives, taken because of a conflict Lena was now part of. What if I'm wrong? What if I miss something critical? Then we adapt. But I trust your instincts more than I trust my own right now. His voice cracked slightly. I can't think clearly about this. Elena is the only family I have left who's worth anything. If something happens to her because I missed something... He didn't finish, didn't need to. Lena understood the stakes perfectly. I'll do it, she said. When's the call? 23 hours from now if we wait for their deadline. But I'm not waiting that long. I'll contact them in 6 hours, enough time to gather intelligence, but soon enough to show we're taking this seriously. Marcus pulled out his phone, already coordinating. Sophia, I need Elena's phone records, her schedule for the past week, anyone she's been in contact with. James is tracking the burner phone's signal. I want to know everywhere it's been since Elena was taken. The next 6 hours were the most intense of Lena's life. She reviewed everything they knew about Castellano, his psychological profile, his business history, patterns, and how he'd handled conflicts before. She studied recordings of his previous negotiations, learning his tells, understanding what genuine compromise looked like versus strategic deception. She also learned about Elena Vale. Marcus provided photos, medical journals she'd published, testimonials from patients' families about the surgeon who'd saved their children. Elena was exactly what Marcus had said, brilliant, compassionate, completely removed from his criminal enterprise. She didn't deserve to be caught in this conflict. The guilt was crushing. If Lena hadn't identified Marco, hadn't exposed Castellano's operation, maybe he wouldn't have felt desperate enough to take a civilian. Maybe Elena would still be safe at work, saving lives, unaware that her brother's business had just put her in mortal danger. Stop. Marcus's voice cut through her spiraling thoughts. He'd entered the library where she was working without her noticing. I can see what you're thinking. This isn't your fault. I exposed Castellano's operation. I gave you the intelligence that made him desperate. You did your job. Castellano chose to respond by taking my sister instead of accepting his losses and rebuilding. Marcus sat across from her. Lena, if you're going to work in this world, you need to understand something fundamental. People are responsible for their own choices. You provided accurate analysis. I made strategic decisions based on that analysis. Castellano chose to escalate by violating every rule that keeps this business from becoming complete chaos. That's on him, not you. But if you hadn't, I'd still be vulnerable to his systematic compromise of my suppliers. Eventually, that vulnerability would have cost me significantly more than one difficult negotiation. His voice was firm. I know you're struggling with the weight of consequences, but you can't function if you take responsibility for other people's choices. That way lies paralysis. Lena absorbed this, trying to internalize the logic even as her emotions resisted. How do you do it? Make decisions that affect people's lives without being destroyed by the outcomes. I accept that perfect outcomes aren't possible. I make the best decisions I can with available information, and I live with the results. He paused. And I have people I care about who keep me anchored to what matters. Elena is that person for me. She reminds me that there's a world beyond this business, and some things are worth more than strategic advantage. What happens if we can't get her back? Marcus's expression went absolutely cold. Then Castellano learns that some lines, once crossed, can never be uncrossed. And everyone else learns what happens when you make that mistake. The implication was clear. If Elena died, Marcus's response would be total and devastating. Not strategic, not measured, absolute destruction of everything Castellano had built. I need you to keep me from that outcome, Marcus said quietly. I need you to help me read Castellano accurately enough to navigate this negotiation successfully. Can you do that? Lena looked at the man across from her. 3 weeks ago, he'd been a stranger at a restaurant. Now he was asking her to help save his sister's life using skills she'd only recently begun applying to real-world situations. The responsibility was terrifying. I'll do everything I can, she promised. The call to Castellano happened in the same conference room where they'd met with David Chen. But the atmosphere was completely different, tense and focused, everyone aware that mistakes would cost a life that mattered more than business. Marcus dialed the number from the burner phone. It rang 3 times before connecting. Mr. Vale? The voice was different from the recording. No digital alteration, just a man who sounded tired and cornered. You're calling early. I gave you 24 hours. I'm calling because you have something that belongs to me, and I want it back. Marcus's voice was absolutely controlled. What are your terms? You back off my operations, you stop interfering with my suppliers, you forget everything that traitor Marco told you. Castellano's voice carried desperation beneath attempted authority. You do that, and your sister comes home safe. Lena watched Marcus's face carefully, but she was listening to Castellano. His stress was obvious, speaking too quickly, breath patterns suggesting elevated heart rate. This wasn't a man in control of the situation. This was someone who'd made a desperate move and was now trying to leverage it into survival. I need proof Elena's alive and unharmed, Marcus said. There was movement on the other end, muffled conversation. Then a woman's voice, shaky but defiant. Marcus, I'm okay. They haven't hurt me, but they're serious about... That's enough. Castellano came back on. She's fine. Scared, but fine. She stays that way if you agree to my terms. Marcus's jaw clenched, but his voice remained steady. I'll consider your terms, but I need time to verify you can actually deliver on your end, 48 hours. You have 24, that's not negotiable. Lena tapped twice on the table, their signal. Marcus caught it immediately. Then we have a problem, Marcus said, because I can't dismantle operations that took years to build in 24 hours. I need time to extract myself from existing commitments, redirect resources, ensure my people don't keep interfering out of habit or loyalty. His tone was reasonable, professional. 48 hours gives me time to actually deliver what you're asking for. 24 hours means I'm making promises I can't keep, which doesn't help either of us. Silence on the other end. Lena imagined Castellano weighing options, trying to read whether Marcus was being genuine or buying time. 36 hours, Castellano said finally. That's my final offer. After that, things get complicated for your sister. 36 hours, Marcus agreed. You'll hear from me before then with confirmation that I'm backing off your operations. In exchange, Elena gets released unharmed at a location of my choosing. Location of my choosing, Castellano corrected. I'm not walking into a trap. Then we use a neutral location. Public, witnessed, safe for both parties. Marcus's voice was firm. I get my sister back alive and unharmed, or there's no deal. That's non-negotiable. Another pause. Lena could almost hear Castellano's calculations. He needed Marcus to back off, needed the pressure relieved, but he also needed to maintain some control over the situation. Fine. Neutral location, but I choose where and when within the 36-hour window. Agreed. Marcus ended the call and immediately looked at Lena. What did you hear? He's desperate and scared, speaking too quickly, breath control problems, agreed to negotiation points too easily. Lena pulled up her notes. The time pressure is arbitrary. He doesn't have a real reason for 24 hours versus 48 hours. He's just trying to maintain control of a situation that's already slipping away from him. Did he sound like someone who'll actually release Elena? This was the critical question. Lena reviewed everything she'd heard, every micro detail in Castellano's voice and word choices. He believes releasing her is possible. Whether he'll actually follow through depends on variables we can't control. Whether his organization pressures him to maintain the leverage, whether he gets more desperate in the next 36 hours, whether he thinks he can get more by keeping her. Marcus absorbed this, his expression grim. So we can't trust the negotiation alone. No. We need to find her independently and be ready to extract by force if necessary. Lena met his eyes. The negotiation buys time, but it's not the actual solution. Agreed. Marcus turned to James. Status on tracking? The burner phone pinged towers in 3 locations: South Loop, Bridgeport, and back of the yards. We're analyzing patterns to narrow down likely locations. James pulled up a map. Castellano owns property in 2 of those areas. We're running surveillance now.
Bet. I want every property identified and watched, Marcus ordered. When we find where they're holding Elena, we go in hard and fast. No negotiation, no warning. We extract her and deal with consequences after. The security team mobilized with practiced efficiency. Lena watched them coordinate surveillance, plan extraction scenarios, prepare for violence if negotiation failed. This was Marcus's organization at full operational capacity, professional, thorough, absolutely focused on a single objective. What do you need from me? Lena asked. Keep analyzing Castellano's communications. If he makes contact again, I need to know if anything's changed. Marcus was already reviewing building schematics on a tablet. And prepare for the possibility that you'll need to read the situation during the actual exchange. If we do end up meeting Castellano to get Elena back, I need you there identifying any deception before it becomes dangerous. The thought of being present during a hostage exchange terrified her, but Lena nodded agreement. She was part of this now, for better or worse. The next 30 hours were agonizing. Marcus's team identified 3 properties where Castellano might be holding Elena. Surveillance confirmed activity at one location, a warehouse in Bridgeport with unusual security for a supposedly vacant building. Heat signatures suggested multiple people inside, including at least one in a separate secured room. That's where she is, James confirmed. We've got layout from city records, but we need to verify current interior configuration before we go in. How long? Marcus asked. 4 hours for proper reconnaissance, 6 to plan the extraction properly. Marcus checked his watch. We have 28 hours until Castellano's deadline. Do the reconnaissance, plan for extraction as a backup, but I'm still hoping negotiation works. Lena understood the calculation. Marcus wanted to avoid violence if possible, not for moral reasons, but because a firefight in a warehouse created risks to Elena that a clean exchange wouldn't. But he also wasn't trusting Castellano's word without backup options. Her phone rang, her thesis advisor. Lena, your defense is in 2 days. I need to confirm you're prepared to present. Are you going to be able to make it? The question felt surreal. Here she was, helping plan a potential hostage rescue, and Dr. Morrison was worried about her thesis defense. I'll be there. I'm prepared. Are you sure? Because if you need more time, we can reschedule. Your research is too important to present when you're distracted by personal issues. I'll be there, Lena repeated, injecting confidence she didn't feel. 2 days? I'll be ready. She hung up and found Marcus watching her. Your defense. It'll be fine. I've prepared for months. A few days of distraction won't matter. The lie tasted bitter. Lena, if you need to step back from this situation to focus on your academic responsibilities, I'm not stepping back. The words came out harder than intended. Elena's missing because of analysis I provided. I'm seeing this through. Marcus studied her for a moment, then nodded. Okay. But after this is resolved, you take time to prepare properly. Your thesis matters, and I won't be responsible for you failing because I needed your help. 26 hours before the deadline, Castellano called again. Marcus put it on speaker immediately. I've been thinking about our arrangement, Castellano said without preamble. I need additional assurances that you're actually backing off my operations and not just saying what I want to hear. What kind of assurances? Marcus's voice was carefully neutral. I want Vincent Torino to publicly confirm that you're no longer interfering with his shipping operations.
I want verification that you've withdrawn surveillance from my properties. And I want a financial guarantee, insurance that you won't immediately resume pressure once I release your sister. Lena listened carefully. Castellano was adding demands, which suggested either growing desperation or growing confidence. His voice still carried stress markers, but there was calculation beneath it now. She tapped twice. Marcus caught the signal. Those are substantial additional demands, Castellano. Our original agreement was simple. I back off your operations in exchange for Elena's safe return. You're changing terms. I'm protecting my interests. You're a strategic thinker, Mr. Vale. You understand that releasing my only leverage without guarantees would be foolish. Castellano's voice hardened. I need assurances, or the deal changes. What does deal changes mean? It means your sister's safety becomes contingent on compliance that I can verify. The threat was clear. Give me what I'm asking for, or we renegotiate the entire arrangement. Marcus's face went cold, but his voice remained controlled. I'll consider your additional terms. But understand, Castellano, if anything happens to Elena, there's no amount of backing off that saves you. I'll dismantle everything you've built and everyone who works for you. That's not a threat. It's a promise. Then we understand each other. Castellano ended the call. The conference room erupted in controlled tension. Marcus slammed his hand on the table once. The only outward sign of the rage Lena knew was building inside him. He's stalling, James observed. Adding demands means he doesn't think he can win the original negotiation. Or he's realized Elena is worth more as ongoing leverage than as a one-time exchange, Sophia added grimly. Marcus turned to Lena. Your assessment. He's scared but trying to hide it with aggression. The additional demands aren't strategic, they're defensive. He's trying to create complexity because simple exchange scenarios make him vulnerable. Lena pulled up her notes. But the threat about Elena's safety changing if you don't comply? That felt genuine. He's telling himself that escalating is necessary, which means he's capable of following through. Recommendation? Lena took a breath, understanding the weight of what she was about to say. Don't give him more time to rationalize worse outcomes. Move up the extraction. Get Elena out before he convinces himself that keeping her indefinitely is his best play. Marcus looked around the room. James, how fast can we be ready? 2 hours for final reconnaissance, another hour to position teams. We can go in 3 hours from now. James pulled up the warehouse schematic. It's risky going in without complete intelligence, but doable. Do it! Marcus's voice carried absolute authority. We extract Elena in 3 hours. I don't care what it costs or who gets hurt in the process. My sister comes home tonight. The next 3 hours were controlled chaos. Lena watched Marcus's security team transform from intelligence analysts into tactical operators. They reviewed entry points, planned for contingencies, coordinated with contacts in law enforcement to ensure police response would be delayed long enough for extraction to succeed. Marcus pulled Lena aside as the team finalized preparations. You're staying here. This isn't observation. This is going to be violent if Castellano's people resist. I understand. I mean it, Lena. What happens in that warehouse is exactly the part of my world I've been protecting you from. You don't need to see it. His expression was serious. I need you here, monitoring communications, ready to analyze if Castellano makes contact again. That's where you're most valuable. Lena wanted to argue, wanted to insist on being present, but she recognized the truth in his words. She wasn't trained for tactical operations. She'd be a liability in a firefight. Her value was analytical, not operational. Bring her home safe, Lena said quietly. That's the only acceptable outcome. Marcus checked his weapon with practiced efficiency, a reminder that for all his strategic thinking and business acumen, he was fundamentally someone who'd built his empire through controlled violence. If something goes wrong, Sophia has instructions about what happens next. Follow her lead. Then he was gone, leading his security team toward a warehouse in Bridgeport, where his sister was being held by a desperate man who'd made the mistake of thinking family was acceptable leverage. Lena sat in the conference room with Sophia, watching surveillance feeds and monitoring communications. The waiting was excruciating. Every minute felt like an hour, every silence on the radio like potential disaster. He'll get her out, Sophia said, though her tension suggested she was trying to convince herself as much as Lena. I've seen Marcus operate in worse situations. He's focused and angry, which makes him more dangerous than usual. What happens if this goes wrong? Then we execute contingency plans that are significantly more violent than a simple extraction. Sophia's voice was grim. Marcus has been restrained in his response to Castellano because he wanted to avoid collateral damage. If Elena dies, that restraint disappears completely. The radio crackled, James's voice low and controlled. In position. Building secured from outside. Preparing entry. Silence. Lena's heart hammered so hard she could feel it in her throat. Breaching now. The next 5 minutes were the longest of Lena's life. She heard fragmented radio chatter, confirmation of entry, movement through the warehouse, contact with hostiles, then silence again that stretched impossibly long. Finally, James's voice. Subject secured. Elena is safe. Multiple hostiles neutralized. Preparing extraction. Relief flooded through Lena so intensely she had to sit down. Sophia closed her eyes briefly, allowing herself one moment of emotion before returning to operational mode. Casualties? She asked into the radio. 3 hostiles down, 2 captured, 1 fled. Our team has minor injuries, nothing critical. Elena is frightened but physically unharmed. Marcus's voice came through next. Bring everyone home. Clean the site. I want the captured hostiles ready for questioning in 2 hours. The operation had succeeded. Elena was safe. An hour later, Marcus returned to the penthouse with Elena. She was a smaller, softer version of her brother. Same dark eyes, same sharp intelligence, but none of the hardness that Marcus carried. She looked exhausted and terrified, wrapped in a blanket despite the warm evening. This is Lena, Marcus introduced them carefully. She's part of my team. She helped find you. Elena looked at Lena with an expression that suggested she was trying to reconcile the young woman in front of her with the criminal organization her brother ran. Thank you, she said quietly. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't... She didn't finish. Didn't need to. They all knew what Castellano might have done if desperation had overcome his remaining rationality. I'm just glad you're safe, Lena said honestly. Your brother was very clear about what mattered most. Elena looked at Marcus with complicated affection. You shouldn't have had to do this. I keep telling you to get out of this business, but you never listen. I listen. I just don't agree. Marcus's voice was gentle in a way Lena had never heard before. Elena, you should rest. We have medical personnel standing by if you need anything. I'm a doctor, Marcus. I can assess my own condition. But she softened it with a tired smile. Though I wouldn't mind some actual food. Whatever they were feeding me barely qualified as nutrition. Sophia materialized with food that looked suspiciously like it had been prepared in advance. Marcus's team planning for every contingency, including what to feed his sister after a successful rescue. Elena ate mechanically while Marcus sat beside her, his entire body language protective in ways that revealed how much she mattered to him. Lena felt like an intruder on a private moment. She started to leave, but Marcus stopped her. Stay. You're part of why she's here. He turned to Elena. Lena identified the patterns that led us to you. Her analysis of Castellano's communications helped us understand what we were dealing with. So you work for my brother? Elena asked Lena directly. Yes, I do. The admission felt strange. This was the first person outside Marcus's organization who Lena had acknowledged her role to. I'm a behavioral analyst. I help him read people and situations. And you're okay with what he does? There was no judgment in Elena's voice, just genuine curiosity. Lena thought about lying, about giving an easy answer that avoided complexity, but Elena deserved better than that. I'm learning to be okay with it. It's not what I planned for my life, but it's where my skills are most valuable. That matters to me. Elena studied her for a long moment. You're young to be making that choice. I'm 26, old enough to understand consequences. Understanding consequences and living with them long-term are different things. Elena's voice was gentle but firm. Marcus has been living with consequences of his choices for 15 years. It's aged him in ways you can't see. Make sure you're prepared for that cost before you commit completely. The warning landed hard. Lena looked at Marcus, seeing him through Elena's eyes. The controlled exterior hiding old wounds, the strategic brilliance masking fundamental loneliness. The empire built at personal costs he'd never fully articulated. "I hear what you're saying," Lena said carefully, "and I appreciate the concern. But I've made my choice." Elena nodded slowly. "Then I hope you find it worth what it costs, for your sake and my brother's." Later that night, after Elena had been settled in a guest room with medical monitoring and security that would make Fort Knox look accessible, Marcus found Lena in the library. She was ostensibly working on her thesis defense preparation, but really just staring at her laptop without seeing it. "Elena likes you," Marcus said without preamble. "She doesn't usually like people in my organization. Says they're either too hardened or too naive to be around." "Which am I?" "Neither. That's why she likes you." He sat across from her. "Lena, what happened today? The extraction, the violence, all of it. That's the part of my world I've been trying to keep you separate from. You read the situation perfectly. Your analysis about Castellano's desperation was accurate, but you didn't have to see what that analysis led to operationally." "3 hostiles down," Lena quoted from the radio chatter. "What does that actually mean?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. "It means 3 of Castellano's people chose to fight rather than surrender when we breached the warehouse. They made a choice, and that choice had fatal consequences." "Did you kill them personally?" "Does it matter?" "It does to me." He met her eyes directly. "Yes, I killed 2 of them. James killed the 3rd. We didn't have time for negotiation, and they were between us and Elena. I made a choice, and I'll live with it." The honesty was brutal. Lena absorbed it, trying to reconcile the man who'd just admitted to killing 2 people with the man who'd sat beside his sister, radiating protective gentleness. "How do you live with it?" she asked again. "By remembering why I did it. Elena is alive because I was willing to do what Castellano's people weren't expecting. That's the calculation I'll carry forever." His voice was steady but heavy. "And tomorrow, when I deal with Castellano himself, I'll make similar calculations based on similar priorities." "What are you going to do to him?" "End this conflict permanently." Marcus's expression went cold. "Castellano violated every rule by taking Elena. That can't stand without response, or everyone else will think family is acceptable leverage. I need to make an example that ensures this never happens again." The implications were clear. Castellano would die, probably along with significant portions of his organization. The systematic dismantling Marcus had talked about would become reality. "And you need me to help with that?" "No, you've done enough. Your job now is to prepare for your thesis defense and prove that the academic part of your life still matters." Marcus stood. "Lena, you're valuable to my organization, but Elena was right. You're young to be committing to this world completely. Make sure you preserve the parts of yourself that don't belong to my business." He left her alone with that warning, echoing his sister's concerns. The next day, Lena forced herself to focus on thesis preparation. She reviewed her research, practiced her defense presentation, prepared for the academic committee's questions. It felt surreal to switch context so completely, from hostage extraction to behavioral psychology theory, but she managed it. Dr. Morrison called in the afternoon. "Lena, I just wanted to check in before your defense tomorrow. Are you feeling confident?" "Yes, I'm ready." And surprisingly, she was. The work was solid, the research thorough, the analysis defensible. She'd spent 6 years building toward this moment. "Good. I've reviewed your final draft again, and I'm genuinely impressed. This is probably the strongest work I've supervised." He paused. "I hope whatever personal situation you've been dealing with resolves soon. You deserve to enjoy this achievement." "Thank you, Dr. Morrison. That means a lot." After the call, Lena sat in her downtown office, her legitimate consultant space, and thought about the 2 versions of herself she was maintaining. Dr. Lena Harper, about to defend groundbreaking research on threat assessment, and Lena, behavioral analyst for a criminal organization who'd just helped rescue a hostage from a warehouse in Bridgeport. Both were real. Both mattered. The question was whether she could sustain both identities long-term, or whether eventually one would consume the other. Her thesis defense the next morning was almost anticlimactic after everything that had happened. The academic committee asked thoughtful questions about her methodology and findings. She answered with confidence earned through both theoretical understanding and recent practical application. They deliberated for 20 minutes before calling her back in to announce she'd passed with distinction. "Congratulations, Dr. Harper," Dr. Morrison said, shaking her hand warmly. "You've earned this." Dr. Harper. The title felt both familiar and foreign. She'd worked toward it for 6 years, but now it also served as cover for work she could never discuss in academic settings. Marcus sent flowers to her apartment, an enormous arrangement that her roommate photographed and texted about enthusiastically. "Who are these from? Do you have a secret boyfriend you haven't mentioned?" "Just a friend congratulating me on finishing my thesis," Lena texted back. Another careful lie in an increasingly long chain of them. That evening, Marcus invited Lena to dinner at the penthouse, a private celebration, just the two of them. Elena had returned to her own apartment with security Marcus insisted on despite her protests. The crisis was over, life was returning to something approximating normal. Except Lena knew better. Castellano's fate was still being decided. The larger conflict was still resolving. Normal was a fiction they were maintaining until the next crisis emerged. "Congratulations on your doctorate," Marcus said, raising a glass of wine that probably cost more than Lena's monthly rent. "You've earned a significant achievement while also proving invaluable to my organization. That's rare." "Thank you." Lena touched her glass to his. "What happened with Castellano?" Marcus's expression went neutral. "He's no longer a concern. Neither is his organization. The people he compromised have been identified and dealt with appropriately. The threat is eliminated." The careful phrasing told Lena everything she needed to know. Castellano was dead. His organization was dismantled. Marcus had made the example he'd promised, and everyone in his world would understand the message. "Do you need me to feel guilty about that?" Lena asked quietly. "About the role my analysis played in everything that followed?" "I need you to understand your role accurately. You identified threats. You provided intelligence. You helped rescue Elena. The strategic decisions about how to respond were mine." Marcus set down his wine glass. "Lena, if you're going to continue working for me, and I hope you will, you need to accept that your analysis will sometimes lead to hard outcomes. That's the nature of what we do." "I know. I'm trying to make peace with it." "Are you succeeding?" She thought about it honestly. "Sometimes. Other times I wonder if I'm just getting better at rationalization, at telling myself that providing accurate information absolves me of responsibility for how that information is used. It doesn't absolve you, but it also doesn't make you culpable for decisions you didn't make." Marcus leaned forward slightly. "You're struggling with something I struggled with for years. The difference between being part of a system and being responsible for every outcome that system produces. Eventually, you have to decide what level of participation you can live with." "What level did you decide on?" "Complete participation with clear boundaries. I make decisions. I accept consequences. But I don't take responsibility for other people's choices that happen to intersect with my business." He paused. "And I maintain relationships with people like Elena, who remind me that there's more to existence than strategic advantage." Lena understood what he was offering, a framework for managing the cognitive dissonance, a way to participate without being consumed. Whether it would actually work long-term remained to be seen. 2 months later, Lena sat in her downtown office reviewing files for an upcoming negotiation. Her doctorate was official. Her consulting business was thriving with legitimate clients Marcus's team had carefully curated, and her role in his organization had solidified into something sustainable. She still struggled with the weight of consequences, still questioned whether her analysis led to outcomes she could live with. But she was learning to carry it, learning to make peace with the complicated reality of who she'd become. Her phone buzzed. Marcus, asking her to review behavioral patterns in a new supplier's organization. Routine work, exactly what she'd been hired for. She pulled up the files and started analyzing, her trained eye catching patterns that would inform Marcus's strategic decisions. This was her life now, existing in two worlds simultaneously, maintaining two identities, using skills developed in one context to serve purposes in another. It wasn't what she'd planned when she'd enrolled in graduate school 6 years ago, It wasn't what she'd imagined when she'd started studying threat assessment and behavioral psychology. But it was real. It mattered. And she was good at it. Lena pulled up the supplier files and began her analysis. Dr. Lena Harper and behavioral analyst Lena existing in the same moment, the same choice, the same complicated reality. She'd warned a stranger in a restaurant 3 months ago, and that single decision had transformed her entire life. She'd left behind safety and conventional success for something infinitely more complex and dangerous. She'd chosen the darkness, not with closed eyes, but with them wide open. And somehow, that made all the difference. 6 months after the rescue, Elena invited Lena to coffee. Separate from Marcus's world, just two women who'd been connected by extraordinary circumstances. They met at a cafe near Northwestern, normal and public and completely disconnected from criminal enterprises. "You're still working for my brother," Elena observed. It wasn't a question. "I am. It's complicated, but yes." "And you're okay with that? Really okay, not just telling yourself you are?" Lena thought about it carefully. "I'm okay with the work I do. I'm good at reading people, at identifying patterns, at providing analysis that helps Marcus make better decisions. That part feels valuable. And the rest of it? The consequences your analysis leads to? I'm learning to live with it. Some days are harder than others." Lena met Elena's eyes. "Your brother was right about something he told me early on. Everyone in his world made choices that brought them there. My job is to provide accurate information. What happens after that is on the people making strategic decisions." Elena smiled slightly. "You sound like him. That's both concerning and oddly reassuring." "Why reassuring?" "Because Marcus has been alone in that world for a long time. Everyone who works for him is either completely loyal or completely mercenary. You're neither, which means you might actually keep him honest." She paused. "He cares about you, you know, in ways that concern me because caring makes him vulnerable." Lena hadn't expected that. "We work together, that's all. For now. But I've seen how he looks at you when he thinks no one's watching, like you're something worth protecting beyond strategic value." Elena's voice was gentle. "Be careful with that, Lena. My brother doesn't let people close easily, and when he does, it comes with complications you're probably not prepared for." The warning lingered long after they parted ways. Lena returned to her office thinking about Marcus, the controlled businessman, the protective brother, the dangerous man who'd killed to save his sister. The complexity of who he was beneath the strategic exterior. That evening, she found herself back at the penthouse for a routine briefing. Marcus was reviewing her analysis of the new suppliers, nodding approval at conclusions she had drawn from behavioral patterns. "Good work. This confirms what I suspected about their financial stability." He closed the file. "How was coffee with Elena?" "She's worried about you. About us." Lena said it without thinking, then caught herself. "About me working in your organization, I mean." Marcus looked at her with that careful attention she'd come to know well. "And what did you tell her?" "That I'm learning to live with the complications." She held his gaze. "That some days are harder than others, but I'm managing." "Are you? Really managing, not just surviving?" It was the same question she'd been asking herself for months. Lena thought about the lies she told her friends, the compartmentalization she'd mastered, the weight she carried from knowing her analysis affected real lives. But she also thought about the intellectual satisfaction of doing work that mattered, the strange community she'd found in Marcus's organization, the person she was becoming through challenges she'd never anticipated. "I'm managing," she said finally, "and maybe that's enough for now." Marcus nodded slowly, something shifting in his expression. "For now," he agreed. "But Lena, if that changes, if the cost becomes too high, I need you to tell me. I won't keep you in a world that destroys you. Even if it means losing a valuable analyst?" Even then, his voice was absolutely serious. "You're more than valuable to me. You're someone who chose this world with open eyes and honest recognition of what it costs. That's rare enough that I won't risk corrupting it by pushing you beyond what you can sustain." The admission hung between them, layered with implications neither was ready to address directly. Lena stood to leave, gathering her files. "Dr. Harper," Marcus said, using her new title deliberately. "Thank you. for everything you've done. For Elena, for the organization, for maintaining your integrity while learning to navigate this world. It matters more than you probably realize. Lena left the penthouse that night understanding that she'd crossed some invisible threshold. She wasn't just an analyst anymore. She was someone Marcus valued beyond strategic utility, someone he was actively protecting from the worst parts of his world while trusting her with the parts that mattered most. The complexity of it was overwhelming. But it was also, strangely, exactly what she'd been looking for when she'd handed him that proposal months ago. Work that challenged her, relationships that mattered, purpose that extended beyond theoretical frameworks into messy, complicated reality. She'd chosen the darkness with open eyes, and she was learning, day by day, how to carry the light she'd brought with her into spaces that had never seen it before. That had to count for something. That had to be enough.